That night, someone finally asked the question no one dared to answer. Before we start, likes and subscribes help me keep making these. Where are you listening from? Drop your city and time in the comments. I'm always reading them thinking, wait, people in Oregon listen to history stories to sleep. Okay, tonight we are talking about why 1950s French people ate butter and stayed thin, while most modern Americans struggle with obesity. But before we go anywhere, get cozy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. Picture this. Paris, 1952. A woman named Marguerite walks down Rue Mouffetard with a wicker basket under her arm. The morning air smells like fresh bread and something earthier, almost sweet, like the stones themselves have been baking in decades of sunlight. She stops at the fromagerie, where wheels of cheese sit in the window like small suns. The shopkeeper weighs the cheese on a scale before giving it to her. Because in 1950s France, butter wasn't just food, it was currency, it was culture, it was the thing that made everything else make sense. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, French people ate butter, so what? And that's fair. But here's the thing. They didn't just eat butter, they ate butter with every meal, on bread, in sauces, melted over vegetables. They consumed more fat per capita than almost any population on Earth. And yet, when researchers started paying attention in the 1960s, they noticed something strange. French people weren't dying of heart disease at the rates Americans were. They weren't gaining weight the way people in other industrialized nations were. They were, by all measurable standards, healthier, leaner, living longer, and no one could figure out why. But I haven't told you the most important part yet, because this wasn't just about butter. It was about a whole way of life that was already starting to disappear, even as researchers scrambled to document it. A rhythm of eating, of moving, of living, that didn't require anyone to think about it. It just was. And by the time anyone thought to write it down, it was almost gone. The streets Marguerite walked had been walked by her mother, and her grandmother before that. The same bakery, the same butcher, the same cheese shop where the owner knew your name and remembered what you bought last week. Everything moved at a pace that felt almost biological, natural, like breathing. And here's what makes this whole thing worth losing sleep over, or I guess, worth falling asleep to. By 1952, American researchers were already starting to panic about heart disease. Rates were climbing, waistlines were expanding, and the advice being given was simple. Cut the fat, don't eat butter, don't eat cream, avoid red meat. Meanwhile, across the ocean, French people were doing the exact opposite, and living just fine. Better than fine, actually. They were thriving. And the disconnect between what was happening in France and what was happening in America would eventually become one of the most studied paradoxes in nutritional science. They'd even give it a name, the French paradox. Catchy, right? But back in 1952, nobody called it anything. It was just life. Marguerite didn't know she was part of a paradox. She didn't know that decades later scientists would study her eating habits like they were archaeological artifacts. She just knew that she needed butter for dinner, and that the good stuff was worth the extra francs. She knew that her mother had taught her to cook with butter, and her grandmother before that, and that there was a right way to do things and a wrong way, and the wrong way usually involved shortcuts. Margarine, for instance. That was a shortcut, and shortcuts in Marguerite's experience never tasted right. They left something missing, something you couldn't quite name but could definitely feel. So she bought the butter, and she walked home, and she didn't think about obesity or heart disease or paradoxes. She thought about what she'd make for dinner, and whether her husband would be home on time, and whether the beans she'd bought yesterday were still good. Small thoughts, everyday thoughts, the kind that fill a life without anyone noticing. But here's the thing you need to understand before we go any further. Those small thoughts, those everyday rhythms, they mattered more than anyone realized. Let's go back a bit further. Let's go to the France that Marguerite's mother knew. The 1920s and 30s, before the war, before everything changed. In those days, French people didn't eat breakfast the way you might imagine. No big spread, no eggs and bacon and hash browns, just coffee. Black, or with a splash of milk if you were lucky, and bread, a baguette, or part of one, bought fresh that morning from the boulangerie 2 streets over. You tore off a piece. You spread it with butter, if you had it, maybe a bit of jam, and that was it. Small, simple, enough to get you to lunch, but not so much that you felt heavy. The coffee was strong, the kind that made your eyes open a little wider, and you drank it standing at the counter or sitting at a small table by the window, watching the street wake up. Lunch, though. Lunch was the thing. Around noon, or just after, everything stopped. Shops closed, offices emptied, factories went quiet. Not because of some government mandate, but because that's just how it was done. You went home if you could, or you sat with co-workers in a cafe, and you ate. Slowly. A piece of pâté maybe. Bread, of course. Always bread. A bit of cheese. Some kind of vegetable, probably cooked in butter or oil. Maybe a small piece of meat. And wine. Not a lot, just a glass. Maybe two. The whole thing took an hour, sometimes longer. No one rushed. Rushing, in fact, was considered a little rude. A little American. Now here's where it gets interesting. And I mean genuinely, sleep-inducingly interesting in a way that'll make your brain go soft and happy. Because the food itself, the butter and cheese and wine, that's only part of the story. The other part is what didn't happen. There were no snacks. I mean that literally. The concept of snacking, eating between meals just because you were a little bored or a little peckish, didn't really exist. You ate at meal times. That was it. If you got hungry between lunch and dinner, well, you waited. Your body learned to expect food at certain times, and it adjusted. Hunger came and went in waves, and you just rode them out. But I haven't told you the strangest part yet, because even in the poorest neighborhoods, even in homes where money was tight and luxuries were rare, people still bought butter. Real butter, the expensive kind. Not margarine, not some cheaper substitute. Butter. And they used it sparingly, but they used it. A little went a long way. You didn't slather it on, you didn't drown things in it. You used just enough to make the food taste like something, like itself but better. And that, more than anything, was the trick. Quality over quantity, flavor over volume. A bite of something rich and good, and then you stopped. Not because you were trying to be disciplined, but because you were satisfied. Can you imagine yourself in that kind of rhythm, eating only when it was time, savoring each bite, not thinking about food again until the next meal? It sounds almost impossible now, doesn't it? But back then it wasn't a diet, it wasn't a plan. It was just how things were done. Your grandmother did it, your mother did it, you did it. And if you tried to do it differently, if you tried to eat at odd hours or grab food on the go, people would look at you a little strangely. Not with judgment exactly, more like confusion, like you'd forgotten how to be a person. And here's the thing that'll really make your brain melt in that good drowsy way. The French didn't think of food as fuel. They didn't eat to get energy or stay productive. They ate because it was time to eat. Because eating was a thing you did with other people, at a table, with real plates and real forks and maybe a cloth napkin if you were feeling fancy. The act of eating was almost ceremonial, not in a stuffy way, just in a considered way. You paid attention. You tasted things. You noticed when the bread was particularly good, or when the butter had that sweet grassy flavour that meant the cows had been eating clover. And all of this, every bit of it, was already starting to fade by the 1950s. The war had changed things. Rationing had changed things. The slow creep of American-style convenience was changing things. But in 1952 you could still find it if you knew where to look, in neighbourhoods like Marguerite's, in small towns in Provence and Burgundy, in farmhouses where people still churned their own butter and baked their own bread and didn't think twice about it. But the researchers were starting to notice, and once they noticed, everything would change. The first American researcher to really pay attention was a man named Ancel Keys. You've probably never heard of him, which is fine, because he's not the kind of person who makes for exciting dinner conversation. But in the early 1950s, Keys was becoming obsessed with a question that kept him up at night. Why were American men, particularly middle-aged businessmen, dropping dead from heart attacks at alarming rates? It was becoming an epidemic. Executives in their 40s and 50s, seemingly healthy, suddenly clutching their chests in boardrooms and falling over, dead before the ambulance arrived. And Keys, who was a physiologist at the University of Minnesota, wanted to know why. He had a theory. He thought it was the fat, all that butter and cream and red meat Americans were eating. It had to be clogging their arteries, right? Made sense, seemed logical. So Keys started collecting data. He looked at death rates from heart disease in different countries. He looked at what people were eating, and he found exactly what he expected to find. Countries that ate a lot of fat had high rates of heart disease. Countries that ate less fat had lower rates. Simple, clean, case closed. Except, well, there was this one country that didn't fit the pattern at all. France. The French ate more saturated fat than almost anyone. Butter, cheese, cream, duck fat, you name it. And yet their heart disease rates were among the lowest in the developed world. Keys looked at the data. Looked at it again. Checked his numbers. and the data didn't change. The French were eating fat and not dying, which from Keyes' perspective was deeply annoying. But here's what Keyes didn't understand yet, what nobody really understood in 1952, and what you're about to fall asleep learning. The fat wasn't the problem. Or rather, the fat wasn't the whole problem. It was everything else around the fat. The context, the culture, the way food was grown and prepared and eaten and thought about. But I haven't told you why this actually mattered yet. Because back in America, something very different was happening. The post-war boom was in full swing. Suburbs were sprouting up like mushrooms. Highways were being built. Shopping malls were opening. And with all of this growth came a new way of eating. Convenience foods, frozen dinners, canned vegetables, tang, cheese whiz, breakfast cereals that were more sugar than grain. And crucially, critically, people were eating more. Portion sizes were growing. Snacking was becoming normal. You'd have breakfast, then a mid-morning snack, then lunch, then an afternoon snack, then dinner, then maybe something while watching TV. Food was everywhere, all the time, and it was cheap and easy and you didn't even have to think about it. You just ate. Meanwhile, in France, Marguerite was still walking to the market every day. She was still buying fresh vegetables and a bit of meat, and her precious butter. She was still eating lunch at noon, and dinner at 7, and nothing in between. She was still walking everywhere because she didn't own a car. Most people didn't. You walked to the market. You walked to work. You walked to visit your neighbour. You walked because that's what you did. Your legs were how you got places. And all of that walking, all of that movement woven into the fabric of daily life, it added up. Not in a way anyone measured, not in a way anyone even noticed, but it added up. And here's the part that'll make your brain go all soft and fuzzy. The French weren't trying to be healthy. They weren't following a diet plan. They weren't exercising. They were just living. Going about their days, doing what their parents had done and their grandparents before that. There was no conscious effort involved, no willpower required. It was just the structure of their lives, the shape of their days that kept them moving and kept them eating in a rhythm that their bodies understood. 3 meals, real food, not too much, and a whole lot of walking. Can you feel yourself sinking deeper into your pillow? Good, because we're just getting started. And the deeper we go into this story, the more you'll realize that everything you thought you knew about food and health and weight was probably wrong, or at least incomplete, missing something crucial, something that got lost somewhere between 1952 and now. But what was it exactly? What was the thing that the French had and Americans were losing? Hold that thought. We'll get there, I promise. Let's talk about bread for a minute. Just bread. Seems simple enough, right? In 1950s France, bread was bought fresh every single day, sometimes twice a day. You didn't buy a loaf on Monday and eat it all week. That would have been absurd. Bread went stale. It got hard. It lost its magic. So you bought it in the morning from the boulangerie down the street, and if you ran out, you went back in the evening and bought more. The boulangerie was never far. Every neighborhood had one. Sometimes 2, sometimes 3, all competing with each other, each one convinced theirs was the best. And they weren't wrong exactly. Each one was a little different. This one's baguettes were a little chewier. That one's had a better crust. The other one opened earlier and you could get your bread while it was still warm. The walk to the bakery was part of the routine. You didn't think about it. You just did it. Morning, after coffee, before the day really started, you'd walk down to get bread. And on the way back, you'd probably run into a neighbour. You'd chat for a minute. Ask about their daughter who was getting married next month. Mention that you saw their son the other day and he looked well. Small talk. The kind that stitches a neighbourhood together without anyone noticing. And then you'd walk home with your bread under your arm, still warm, the smell of it filling the street behind you. But I haven't told you what made this bread different from what Americans were eating. Because in America, bread was changing. It was becoming softer, sweeter, more uniform. Wonder bread, that pillowy white stuff that you could squeeze into a ball, was everywhere. It lasted for weeks, didn't go stale, didn't mould, just sat there in its plastic bag, eternally soft, eternally bland, eternally wrong somehow, but convenient. So convenient. You could buy it once a week at the supermarket along with everything else. No need to make a special trip. No need to go to a bakery. Just toss it in your cart between the canned peas and the frozen fish sticks, and move on. French bread, though. French bread was alive in a way that's hard to explain. It was made with 4 ingredients: flour, water, salt, yeast. That's it. No preservatives, no dough conditioners, no added sugars, just those 4 things, mixed and kneaded and left to rise and then baked in an oven until the crust turned golden and crackled when you pressed it. And when you ate it, really ate it, paid attention to it, you could taste each ingredient. The slight sweetness of the flour, the tang from the yeast, the way the salt brought everything into focus. It was simple food, peasant food really, but it was real. And here's the thing that's going to make your eyes heavy and your thoughts drift. When you eat real food, food that tastes like something, you don't need as much of it. A piece of that French bread, with a little butter, actually satisfied you. You ate it and you were done. You didn't need another piece. You didn't need to keep eating until the whole loaf was gone, because the food had flavor, had substance, had something to say. Whereas Wonder Bread, and all the food that was becoming normal in America, didn't really taste like much at all. It was soft and sweet and vaguely pleasant, but it didn't satisfy. Not really. So you ate more. You ate more because your body was looking for something, some nutrient or flavor or substance, and it wasn't finding it. So you kept eating. Can you imagine eating bread that actually tasted like bread, not like sugar or preservatives or the inside of a plastic bag? Just bread, wheat, and thyme, and heat. That's what Marguerite ate every day. That's what her mother ate. That's what everyone ate. And they ate less of it than you'd think. A few slices with breakfast, a piece with lunch, maybe another piece with dinner. Not a whole loaf, not half a loaf, just enough. And this pattern, this rhythm of eating real food in reasonable amounts, it extended to everything. The cheese was real, the butter was real, the vegetables came from farms, not factories. The meat came from animals that had walked around and eaten grass and lived something resembling a life before they ended up on your plate. Nothing was processed, nothing was engineered, nothing had been designed by food scientists to be as appealing and addictive as possible. It was just food. Plain, simple, real. But back in America, food was becoming something else entirely. Something new, something that had never existed before in human history. And nobody really understood what that would mean. Not yet. Not for another few decades, when the consequences would become impossible to ignore. Now let's talk about something that sounds boring but isn't. Portion sizes. In 1950s France, plates were smaller, not dramatically smaller, not like you were eating off a saucer, just smaller. A dinner plate was maybe 8 or 9 inches across. In America, plates were already creeping toward 10, 11, 12 inches. And here's the thing about plates that nobody really thinks about until it's pointed out to them. Whatever size plate you have, you fill it. It's just human nature. You don't put a small amount of food on a big plate and call it dinner. That looks sad, looks wrong. So you fill the plate. And if the plate is bigger, well, you eat more. Simple as that. Not because you're hungrier, not because you need more food, just because the plate is there and empty space feels like failure. Marguerite's dinner plate was small. Her lunch plate was smaller. And breakfast wasn't really a plated affair at all, just bread and coffee at the counter or the table. Eaten standing or sitting, quickly, before the day started. Dinner might be a piece of fish, maybe the size of your palm, some green beans cooked in butter, a small boiled potato, a piece of bread, a glass of wine. That was it. That was the whole meal. And it was enough. More than enough, actually. You finished and you felt satisfied, full, ready to be done eating. But I haven't told you the most fascinating part yet, because it wasn't just that the portions were smaller, it was that the food was richer, more calorie-dense. A tablespoon of butter has more calories than a tablespoon of margarine. A piece of cheese has more calories than a piece of processed cheese food product. A potato cooked in duck fat has more calories than a baked potato with nothing on it. So the French were eating smaller portions of richer food, and Americans were starting to eat larger portions of blander food. And somehow the French were staying thin, and the Americans were gaining weight. Which seems backward, right? Seems like it should be the other way around. Eat rich food, get fat. Eat bland food, stay thin. But that's not what was happening. The reason, and this is where your brain can really relax into the pillow and let this wash over you, is that rich food is satisfying in a way that bland food isn't. Fat and flavor trigger signals in your brain that say, okay, we're good, we can stop now. Your body recognizes that it's gotten what it needs. Nutrients, calories, flavor compounds, whatever it was looking for, it found it. So you stop eating. You don't need more. Whereas if you're eating food that doesn't taste like much, food that's been stripped of its fat and its flavor and its substance, your body keeps waiting for the signal that never comes, keeps waiting to feel satisfied. So you keep eating. You eat more, but you enjoy it less, and you end up hungry again sooner. It's a trap. A weird modern trap that nobody designed on purpose but that caught millions of people anyway. Marguerite ate her small dinner. She had a piece of chocolate afterward, dark and bitter, just one square. She drank a small cup of coffee, strong and black. And then she was done. She didn't think about food again until breakfast. Didn't raid the refrigerator at 10 p.m. Didn't have a secret stash of cookies in the cupboard. Just done. The meal was over. The kitchen was closed. On to the next thing. Reading, maybe. Or mending. Or just sitting with her husband while he read the paper and she knitted. Quiet things. Slow things. Things that didn't require you to do much of anything except exist. And here's the part that'll make your eyelids droop. The French didn't eat in front of the television. Television was new in the 1950s, and not everyone had one yet, but even the people who didn't eat in front of it. You ate at the table. You sat down. You used real plates and real silverware. And you paid attention to what you were eating. You tasted it. You noticed when the beans were cooked just right or when the fish was a little dry. You talked between bites, or you sat in comfortable silence. But you were present. You were there. Not distracted by a screen or a book or anything else. Just there, eating, being alive. Can you feel how different that is from eating on the couch with a plate balanced on your lap and your eyes on the TV, and your brain somewhere else entirely? Can you feel how eating without paying attention might make you eat more without even noticing? Your body doesn't register the food the same way when you're not paying attention. The satisfaction doesn't land. So you eat, and you finish, and you're still somehow hungry, still somehow looking for something you can't quite name. But Marguerite wasn't looking for anything. She had what she needed, a small meal, real food. Her husband across the table, the sound of forks on plates, the taste of butter and salt and the slight bitterness of good coffee. That was enough. That was everything. And thousands of miles away in American suburbs, people were eating larger and larger meals, in front of larger and larger televisions, wondering why they couldn't seem to stop gaining weight. The answer was everywhere and nowhere, right in front of them, and completely invisible. Let's walk around a French city for a minute. Let's say Lyon, 1953. You step out of Marguerite's building, which is 5 stories tall, no elevator, which means you just walk down 5 flights of stairs. You didn't think about it. You didn't count it as exercise. You just walked down the stairs because that's how you get outside. On the street, you turn left and head toward the market. It's 6 blocks away. You walk. The sidewalk is narrow and crowded with other people also walking. To work, to the market, to school, to wherever they need to go. Everyone walks. The baker walks to his bakery at 4 in the morning. The teacher walks to school. The clerk walks to the office. Walking is just what you do. You don't drive 6 blocks. That would be ridiculous. The car, if you even have one, is for longer trips. Out to the countryside. Across the city. Not 6 blocks. You get to the market and it's loud and bright and smells like earth and fish and flowers all at once. You stop at the vegetable stand and pick out some carrots, some leeks, some potatoes. The woman selling them knows you, asks about your mother. You chat for a minute. You move on to the butcher. Wait in line, buy a small piece of chicken. Move on to the fish stall. Eye the offerings. Decide against it today. Move on. The whole trip takes maybe 45 minutes. You're carrying your basket, which is getting heavier. Your arm is tired. You switch hands. Walk the 6 blocks home. Back up the 5 flights of stairs. Set the basket down in the kitchen. Rest for a minute. But I haven't told you how much movement you just did without trying. Because you just walked 12 blocks. Climbed 10 flights of stairs. Carried a basket that weighed by the end maybe 10 or 15 pounds. And you didn't think of any of it as exercise. It was just getting food. Just living your life. But your body doesn't know the difference between exercise and life. It just knows movement. Muscles working. Heart rate elevated slightly. Calories burned. And if you do this every day, if this is just the structure of your existence, it adds up. Not in a dramatic way, not like you're running marathons, just in a steady, constant way. Movement woven into the fabric of everything. Now picture an American suburb, 1953. You wake up, you eat breakfast at home, you walk to your car in the driveway, you drive to work, you sit at your desk all day, you drive home, you walk from your car to your house, you sit down for dinner, you sit down to watch television, you go to bed. The next day you do it again, and the only time you're moving, really moving, is the walk from your car to wherever you're going and back. Maybe 50 steps, maybe 100. That's it. That's the whole day. And here's where it gets interesting, in that way that makes your thoughts soft and your breathing slow. The American isn't lazy, isn't doing anything wrong, is just living the life that the modern world has made possible. The car makes things easier. The suburbs are spread out, so you need a car. The supermarket is a mile away, so you drive there once a week and buy everything at once. It's efficient. It's convenient. It's progress. Except that somewhere in all that progress, all that convenience, the movement disappeared. The 10,000 small movements that used to fill a day, carrying water, scrubbing clothes, walking to the market, climbing stairs. All of it just vanished, replaced by machines and cars and elevators and frozen dinners that you heat up without even breaking a sweat. Can you feel yourself sinking deeper? Can you feel how the story is just washing over you now, gentle and steady like waves? Good. Stay there, because we're building to something important, something that explains everything. But we're not there yet. We're still in 1953, still watching Marguerite climb her stairs and carry her basket, and live her life in a way that's already becoming impossible, already turning into history. By evening, Marguerite has walked maybe 2 miles, not all at once, just in bits, to the market and back, to her friend's apartment 3 streets over, to the post office, to the park with her daughter, little trips, little movements. And she's climbed maybe 20 flights of stairs, up and down, up and down. Her legs are strong, not gym strong, just life strong. The kind of strength that comes from using your body the way it was meant to be used, every day, without thinking about it. And here's the thing that'll really let you drift off. She's not tired, not unusually tired anyway. This is just normal. This is just Tuesday. Her body expects this, knows this, has adapted to this. And because she's been doing it her whole life, because her mother did it and her grandmother did it, her body is efficient at it, doesn't waste energy, doesn't complain, just does what needs to be done and moves on. Meanwhile, in America, someone is driving to the gym after work to walk on a treadmill for 30 minutes, because they sat in a chair all day, and their doctor said they need to exercise. The irony is almost too perfect, almost too on the nose, but there it is anyway, hanging in the air between 1953 France and 1953 America, obvious to anyone who's paying attention. Which, to be fair, almost no one was. Not yet. Let's talk about something you probably don't think about much. Meal timing. In 1950s France, you ate at specific times. Breakfast around 7 or 8. Lunch at noon, maybe 12:30. Dinner at 7 or 8 in the evening. These weren't suggestions, weren't guidelines. They were simply when meals happened. The whole country operated on this schedule. Restaurants didn't serve lunch at 3 in the afternoon, they were closed. Shops closed for lunch. Offices closed for lunch. Everything stopped, and then, at a certain time, everything started again. There was a rhythm to the day that everyone followed, not because they had to, but because that's just how things were done, how they'd always been done. Your body, and this is the part where you can really let your mind wander, your body adapted to this rhythm. It learned when food was coming. Around noon, your stomach would start to anticipate lunch. Around 7, it would anticipate dinner. And in between, nothing. You weren't hungry between meals, because your body wasn't expecting food between meals. It was like your metabolism had a schedule, knew the plan, and it worked efficiently within that plan, burned what needed to be burned, stored what needed to be stored, didn't waste energy being confused about when the next meal was coming because the next meal always came at the same time. But I haven't told you what was happening in America at the exact same time, because in America, the schedule was falling apart. People were eating breakfast whenever they woke up, lunch whenever they had a break, dinner whenever they got home from work, and in between, snacks. Lots of snacks. A donut with morning coffee, a candy bar in the afternoon, chips while making dinner, popcorn while watching TV, ice cream before bed. Food all day long, never a moment when your body could just rest, just digest, just be done with food for a while. It was constantly processing something, constantly being asked to deal with more calories, more sugar, more fat, more everything. And your body, which evolved over millions of years to deal with scarcity and intermittent eating, didn't know what to do with constant abundance. So it stored everything it could. Because who knows when the next famine might come, right? Except the famine never came. The food just kept coming. More and more and more. Marguerite ate breakfast at 7:30. Every day. 7:30. A piece of bread. Butter. Coffee. Done by 7:45. Then nothing until lunch. Nothing. No snack. No mid-morning pastry. Just water maybe. Coffee if she was at work. But no food. And she wasn't hungry, wasn't suffering, wasn't thinking about food constantly. She was just going about her day, working, or cleaning, or whatever needed to be done. Food would come at noon. It always came at noon. So there was no reason to think about it before then. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine going 5 hours without eating, not even thinking about it, not being hungry, not feeling deprived? It sounds impossible, but it's not impossible. It's just forgotten. It's how humans ate for most of history. You ate when there was food, you didn't eat when there wasn't, and your body adapted, became efficient, learned to use its stored energy during the times when food wasn't available. which, in the modern world, would be called intermittent fasting, would be called a diet, would be something you'd have to think about and plan and force yourself to do. But for Marguerite, it was just Tuesday. At noon, she ate lunch, a real lunch. Sat down at a table, maybe at home, maybe at a cafe near her work. Ate slowly, enjoyed it, talked with whoever was there, laughed, complained about the weather, asked about someone's sister who was sick. Normal things, human things. And the meal took an hour, a full hour. Not because she was eating that whole time, but because eating was a social thing, a break, a pause in the day. You didn't just shove food in your face and get back to work. You stopped. You rested. You were a person for an hour, instead of a worker or a mother or whatever role you were playing the rest of the day. And then, after lunch, nothing again. Nothing until dinner. Another 5 or 6 hours. And again she wasn't hungry. Her body knew. Dinner at 7, it could wait. And here's the part that'll make your thoughts go all loose and drifty. Because she'd eaten real food at lunch. Food with fat and protein and substance. Her blood sugar didn't spike and crash, didn't send her looking for a snack an hour later. It stayed stable. Steady. Her body used what it needed and saved the rest, and everything hummed along smoothly. No drama, no cravings, no desperate need for something sweet or salty or crunchy. Just calm, just normal. But in America, people were eating lunch and then eating again 2 hours later. Not because they were hungry, but because the food was there. Because everyone else was eating. Because it was break time, and break time meant food. And their blood sugar was spiking and crashing, all day long. Up and down like a roller coaster. And every crash brought cravings, brought hunger, brought the need for more food, so they ate more. And the cycle continued, day after day after day. And nobody understood why. Nobody could figure out why Americans were getting fatter when they weren't even eating that much more. Except they were. They were eating all the time, just not at meals, between meals. Snacks that didn't count as meals, didn't register as real eating. Just little things. Here and there, throughout the day, adding up to hundreds of extra calories that nobody was tracking or thinking about, or even noticing. But those calories noticed. Your body noticed. And it stored them. Every single one. Now let's talk about sugar, everyone's favorite villain. In 1950s France, sugar was expensive. Not prohibitively expensive. Not like it was a luxury item only the rich could afford. Just expensive enough that you didn't use it carelessly. You didn't dump it into everything. You used it in desserts. In coffee, if you liked your coffee sweet. Maybe in a pastry on Sunday. But it wasn't everywhere. Wasn't in your bread. Wasn't in your soup. Wasn't hiding in your salad dressing or your crackers or your supposedly healthy yogurt. It was just sugar. A thing you added to sweet things. Not a thing that was secretly in everything. Marguerite kept a small bowl of sugar on the table. White sugar, granulated, bought by the kilo from the market. She used it sparingly, a spoonful in her coffee in the morning, another in her afternoon coffee, if she had one. Maybe a little bit more if she was baking something on the weekend. A tart, maybe. Or a simple cake. But that was it. That was the extent of her sugar consumption. Maybe 2 or 3 spoonfuls a day. Some days less, some days none at all. And she never thought about it, never craved it, never felt like she needed more. It was just a small part of her diet, a minor note in the larger symphony of eating. But here's where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean the kind of interesting that makes you want to close your eyes and let the information just seep into your brain without effort. Because in America, sugar was becoming something else entirely. Something new, something that had never existed before in quite this form. It was becoming cheap. Incredibly cheap. Cheaper than it had ever been in human history. And when something becomes that cheap, people start putting it in everything. Not because they need to, not because it makes the food better, but because they can. Because it's there. Because it makes bland food taste like something. By the mid-1950s, American food manufacturers had discovered that if you added sugar to almost anything, people liked it better. Bread, add sugar. Crackers, add sugar. Canned vegetables, add sugar. Peanut butter, add sugar. Not a lot necessarily, just enough to hit a sweet spot in your brain, just enough to make you want more. And it worked. People bought more, ate more, wanted more. And the manufacturers were happy to oblige. More sugar meant more sales. More sales meant more profit. And nobody was thinking about what all that sugar might be doing to people's bodies. Nobody was connecting the dots between rising sugar consumption and rising obesity rates. Not yet. That would come later. Much later. Marguerite's desserts were sweet, but not that sweet. A tart made with fresh fruit and just enough sugar to balance the tartness. A piece of dark chocolate that was more bitter than sweet. A small glass of sweet wine after dinner on special occasions. Nothing cloying, nothing that made your teeth hurt. Just sweet enough to feel like a treat. To mark the end of a meal. To signal to your body that eating was done. And then you moved on. Cleared the table. Washed the dishes. Sat down with a book or a bit of sewing, or just sat, looking out the window, thinking about nothing in particular. Can you feel how different that is? Can you feel how eating a small amount of something truly sweet and then being done with it is different from eating moderately sweet things all day long? The small, truly sweet thing satisfies, completes the meal, tells your brain, we're good, we got the sweet thing, mission accomplished. But the moderately sweet things all day long never satisfy, never complete anything. Just keep your brain in a constant state of wanting more, searching for sweetness, never quite finding enough. And here's the truly sleep-inducing part. Your body can handle sugar. It's designed to handle sugar. In small amounts, in the form of fruit and honey and the occasional treat. What it can't handle is constant sugar. Sugar all day long. Sugar hidden in foods that shouldn't be sweet. Sugar that you're eating without even knowing you're eating it. That overwhelms your system, confuses your metabolism, makes your insulin spike and crash and spike again. Leads to all sorts of problems that nobody in 1953 even had names for yet. Metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes. All of these things were rare in 1950s France, not unheard of, but rare, and common in America, getting more common every year. But nobody was connecting it to the sugar. Not yet. The sugar was invisible, hidden, part of the landscape, just the way food tasted now. Sweet. Everything a little sweet. And if you'd grown up eating it, you didn't even notice. It was just normal. The way things were. The way they'd always been as far as you knew. Marguerite bit into a piece of dark chocolate. Let it melt on her tongue. Tasted the bitterness and the slight sweetness and the complexity of the cocoa. Felt satisfied. Put the rest of the bar away in the cupboard for tomorrow. Didn't think about it again. Didn't need to. One small piece was enough. Was everything. And in America, someone was finishing their third Coca-Cola of the day, wondering why they still felt thirsty. The answer was obvious, but nobody was looking. Let's slow down for a minute and talk about wine, because wine matters here. In 1950s France, wine was not a special occasion drink. It was not something you saved for birthdays or anniversaries or Friday nights. It was just part of lunch and dinner. A glass, sometimes two, with your meal. Red wine usually, sometimes white if you were eating fish. The wine was local. Came from a vineyard maybe 20 miles away, maybe 50. It wasn't fancy, wasn't expensive. Just wine. Table wine. The kind that came in unmarked bottles or jugs and cost about as much as milk. You poured it into a simple glass. You drank it with your food. You didn't think about it much. It was just there, like bread or salt or water. Part of the meal. Now before you start thinking this is going to turn into some kind of celebration of day drinking, stay with me, because the wine actually matters for reasons that have nothing to do with getting drunk. In fact, nobody was getting drunk. A glass or two of wine with a meal, sipped slowly over the course of an hour, doesn't get you drunk. Doesn't even get you tipsy, really. Just gives you a slight warmth, a slight relaxation. Makes the meal feel more complete, more civilized, more like an event, and less like just fuel consumption. But I haven't told you the actually interesting part yet. The wine slowed everything down. When you're drinking wine with a meal, you eat more slowly. You pause between bites. You sip. You talk. You put your fork down. You're not racing through the meal trying to finish and get back to whatever else you need to do. You're there, present, engaged. And that matters. Because when you eat slowly, you give your body time to register that it's full. The signal from your stomach to your brain takes about 20 minutes. 20 minutes. If you eat fast, you can consume way more food than you need before your brain catches up and tells you to stop. But if you eat slowly, sipping wine, talking, pausing, that signal has time to arrive. You stop eating when you're satisfied instead of when you're stuffed. Marguerite ate her dinner over the course of an hour, sometimes longer. She'd take a bite of fish, chew it slowly, swallow, take a sip of wine, cut a piece of potato, eat it, put her fork down. Say something to her husband about the neighbour's new cat. He'd respond. She'd laugh. Pick up her fork again. Another bite. Another sip. The whole meal was a conversation with occasional eating, not eating with occasional conversation. And by the end, she was full, satisfied, content, ready to be done. The wine glass was empty, the plate was empty, everything felt complete, finished, right. Can you imagine eating dinner for an hour? Can you imagine sitting at a table for that long just eating and talking and being? It probably sounds impossible, sounds like something you don't have time for. But here's the thing, and let your mind relax into this. You do have time. Everyone has time. It's just a question of what you do with it. Marguerite didn't have more hours in her day than you do. She just used them differently. She didn't eat dinner in 20 minutes and then spend 40 minutes scrolling on her phone. She just ate dinner for an hour. Same amount of time, different distribution, different priorities. And here's the truly fascinating part, the part that'll make your thoughts drift like clouds. The wine itself might have been doing something beneficial. Red wine contains compounds called polyphenols, antioxidants, things that might help with heart health and inflammation and all sorts of other things that researchers were only beginning to understand in the 1950s. Nobody knew about polyphenols back then. Nobody was drinking wine for the health benefits. They were just drinking wine because that's what you did. But coincidentally, accidentally, they were consuming something that might have been protecting their hearts and their arteries even as they ate butter and cheese and cream. Meanwhile, in America, people were drinking milk with dinner, or water, or increasingly, soda. Coca-Cola was becoming a dinner table staple, something sweet to wash down your meal, and nobody thought twice about it. It was just a drink, just something cold and refreshing. The fact that it contained 8 spoonfuls of sugar per bottle didn't register as a problem. It didn't register at all, really. It was just soda. Everyone drank soda. It was modern. It was American. It was progress. Marguerite finished her wine, set the glass down gently, looked at her empty plate and felt that deep, satisfying sense of completion that comes from a meal eaten slowly and well. She wasn't thinking about food anymore, wasn't planning her next snack or eyeing the kitchen for something else to eat. She was done. Truly done. The meal was over. The day was winding down. Soon she'd wash the dishes, slowly, without hurry, and then she'd sit and read, or mend, or just be still. And she wouldn't eat again until breakfast tomorrow, 14 hours from now. And that was fine. That was normal. Her body knew the plan. But in American homes, dinner was finished in 20 minutes. Everyone ate quickly, barely tasting the food, eyes on the television or on their plates, not on each other. And then, an hour later, someone would get up and go to the kitchen, open the refrigerator, look inside, not because they were hungry, but because the meal didn't feel finished, didn't feel complete. Something was missing. So they'd find something, anything. Leftover cake, a handful of crackers, a piece of cheese. Just something to fill that strange empty feeling that had nothing to do with hunger and everything to do with the way they'd eaten. Fast, distracted, disconnected. And the pattern would repeat itself, night after night after night, until it wasn't a pattern anymore. It was just life, just the way things were, the way they'd always been, as far as anyone could remember. Now we need to talk about something that sounds technical but isn't really: food processing. In 1950s France, food was minimally processed, and by minimally, I mean barely at all. Vegetables came from the ground, meat came from animals, bread came from flour and water and yeast and salt, cheese came from milk, butter came from cream. Everything was, more or less, in the form that nature intended. Modified by human hands, sure. Cooked and combined and seasoned, but recognizable. You could look at a piece of food and understand what it had been before it arrived on your plate. This carrot was a carrot growing in soil. This chicken was a chicken walking around a farm. Simple, direct, honest. But something was beginning to happen in America. Something quiet at first, almost invisible. Food was starting to spend more time in factories and less time in kitchens. It was being broken down into components and then reassembled into new forms. Flour and sugar and fat weren't being combined in someone's kitchen anymore. They were being combined in massive industrial mixers, measured precisely, mixed with stabilizers and emulsifiers and preservatives, things that made the food last longer, ship better, stay fresh on shelves for weeks or months. And nobody thought this was a problem. It was progress. It was efficiency. It was feeding more people more conveniently than ever before. What could be wrong with that? Marguerite bought flour, she bought butter, she bought eggs, and sometimes, when she had time on a Sunday afternoon, she made a cake. She mixed the ingredients by hand, poured the batter into a pan, baked it in her oven, and when it was done she had a cake. A simple, straightforward cake that tasted like butter and eggs and sugar, and not much else, and it was good. Really good. Not because she was a particularly skilled baker, but because the ingredients were good. Real butter, fresh eggs, flour that still smelled like wheat. The cake would last maybe 3 days before it started to go stale, so you ate it within 3 days. Or, you didn't make a cake. Simple as that. But I haven't told you what was replacing homemade cake in America. Because in America, you could now buy a cake mix. A box of powder that contained flour and sugar and leavening agents and dried eggs and powdered milk and a dozen other things that you couldn't pronounce and didn't need to understand. You just added water. Or maybe an egg, to make you feel like you were actually cooking. Stirred it together, poured it into a pan, baked it, and you had a cake. A cake that tasted fine. Not great, but fine. Consistent. Reliable. The same every time. Which was supposed to be good. Supposed to be an improvement. No more guessing, no more failures. Just add water and bake. Easy. Modern. Better. Except it wasn't better. Not really. The cake mix cake tasted like chemicals. Tasted processed. Even if you couldn't quite put your finger on what was wrong with it, something was wrong with it. It didn't satisfy the same way a real cake did. Didn't feel complete. So you ate more of it. Cut a bigger slice. Went back for seconds. Tried to find that satisfaction that never quite arrived. And the cake lasted forever. Weeks. Months even. Because it was full of preservatives. Full of things that prevented mold and staleness and all the natural processes that happen to real food. It was food that didn't rot, which should have been a warning sign. Should have made people pause and ask questions. But it didn't. It was just convenient. Just modern. Just the future. Can you feel how far we've drifted from real food? Can you feel how that drift, that slow, steady movement away from ingredients and toward products, might matter? Let your mind turn this over slowly, gently, without effort. Because Marguerite was eating food. Real food. Food that went bad if you didn't eat it quickly enough. Food that required effort and time and attention. And her body knew what to do with that food, recognized it, could break it down and use it and process it without confusion. Her metabolism had evolved over millions of years to handle flour and butter and eggs. It knew the drill. But processed food was new, brand new, unprecedentedly new. Your body had never encountered partially hydrogenated oils before, had never seen high fructose corn syrup, had never dealt with maltodextrin or mono and diglycerides or any of the dozens of other ingredients that were starting to appear in American food. It didn't know what to do with them, didn't have established pathways for processing them, so it did its best. Stored some, burned some, got confused by some, and the net result was chaos. Metabolic chaos. The kind that doesn't happen all at once. The kind that accumulates slowly, over years, until one day you realize you've gained 20 pounds without really changing anything about what you eat. Or so you think. But you have changed something. You've changed everything. You've stopped eating food and started eating food products. And your body knows the difference even if your conscious mind doesn't. Your body keeps score, keeps track, remembers, and eventually, inevitably, the bill comes due. Marguerite ate her slice of homemade cake, savoured it, felt satisfied, put the rest away for tomorrow. Her body processed the butter and eggs and sugar without complaint, without confusion. Just another meal, just another Tuesday. And somewhere in America, someone was eating their third piece of cake mix cake, still looking for satisfaction that wouldn't come. Still searching for something real in a world that was increasingly fake. Let's talk about something simple. Walking to work. In 1950s France, most people walked to work, or they took a bus or a train and then walked from the station. Very few people drove, not because cars didn't exist. Cars existed, but they were expensive. Parking was difficult. Streets in old cities weren't designed for cars. They were designed for people and horses and carts. Narrow streets, cobblestones, no parking lots. So you walked to the bus stop, you waited for the bus, you rode the bus, you got off the bus, you walked to your office or your shop or your factory. The whole journey might take 30 minutes, maybe 45, and maybe 15 or 20 minutes of that was walking. Not fast walking, not exercise walking, just walking, at a normal pace, thinking about your day, noticing things, the weather, the other people on the street, the smell of bread from the bakery you passed every morning. Marguerite walked to work. She worked as a clerk in a small office that handled insurance claims. Not exciting work, not fulfilling particularly, just work, a job. The office was about a mile from her apartment. She walked there every morning, took her about 20 minutes. She didn't change into special walking clothes, didn't put on sneakers, just wore her normal shoes, her normal clothes, carried her handbag, walked. Some mornings she walked with her neighbour who worked nearby. They talked about nothing really. The weather, their husbands, something funny one of their children had said. Other mornings she walked alone, let her mind wander, planned her day, or didn't plan anything, just walked. But here's the part where your mind can really start to drift, where you can feel the information settling into your brain like sediment in still water. Because that 20-minute walk in the morning was more important than anyone realized. It woke her body up gently, got her blood moving, got her joints loosened. Not in a dramatic way, not like she was running or doing jumping jacks, just in a gentle, natural way. The way human bodies are meant to wake up, through movement, through being in the world, through walking. And then, at the end of the day, she walked home. Another 20 minutes, helped her transition from work to home, gave her time to decompress, to stop thinking about insurance claims and start thinking about dinner, to shift from one role to another, clerk to wife, worker to person. That's 40 minutes of walking, every day, 5 days a week plus all the other walking she did. To the market, to visit friends, to church on Sunday, to run errands, all of it adding up. An hour of walking most days, sometimes more. And none of it felt like exercise. None of it required willpower or motivation or special equipment. It was just life. Just moving through the world the way humans had moved through the world for thousands of years, on foot, at a walking pace, covering a few miles a day without thinking about it. Meanwhile in America, the suburbs were spreading faster than anyone had anticipated, and with the suburbs came the car, the absolute necessity of the car. You couldn't walk to work because work was 10 miles away. You couldn't walk to the store because the store was 5 miles away. You couldn't walk anywhere because nothing was within walking distance. Everything was designed for cars. Wide streets, parking lots, strip malls, suburbs where every house had a driveway and every driveway had a car, and every car was essential because without it you were stranded, stuck, unable to participate in normal life. So Americans drove to work, drove to the store, drove to visit friends, drove everywhere, and the walking disappeared, not all at once, but gradually, steadily, until one day people realized they weren't walking at all anymore. Not really. Just from their house to their car, from their car to their office, from their office back to their car, from their car back to their house. Maybe 200 steps a day, maybe 300. Nowhere near the several thousand that Marguerite walked without even trying. Can you imagine what that does to a body? Can you imagine going from walking several miles a day to walking a few hundred feet? Your muscles don't work as hard. Your heart doesn't pump as much. Your metabolism slows down, not dramatically, not in a way you'd notice day to day, but cumulatively, over months and years. Your body adapts to the new reality, the reality of sitting, of stillness, of moving only when absolutely necessary, and it stores more energy as fat because, from an evolutionary perspective, if you're not moving much, you must be in a period of rest, must be conserving energy, must be preparing for future activity. Except the future activity never comes. The rest period never ends. You just keep sitting, keep driving, keep being still. Marguerite arrived at work slightly breathless from her walk. She hung up her coat, sat down at her desk, started her day. Her body was awake, alert, ready, and at lunch she walked to a nearby cafe, another 5 minutes each way, and then at the end of the day she walked home. By the time she arrived, she'd walked nearly 2 miles, climbed a few hills. Her leg muscles had worked, her heart had pumped blood a little faster than at rest. Her body had done what it was designed to do, move, and she wasn't even slightly tired, wasn't sore, just felt normal, just felt alive. And in American suburbs, someone was pulling into their driveway after sitting in traffic for 45 minutes, exhausted from the mental strain of driving but physically completely unspent, their body restless and confused, not understanding why it felt so tired when it had barely moved at all. The disconnect was growing, the gap was widening, and nobody was paying attention. Not yet. Not until it was too late to go back. Now let's talk about stress for a minute, because stress matters more than you might think. In 1950s France, life was not stress-free. Let's be clear about that. People had problems. Money was tight for most families. Jobs were uncertain. The memories of the war were still fresh. There was plenty to worry about, plenty to keep you up at night. But there was also a rhythm to life that provided structure, stability, predictability. You woke up at the same time. You ate at the same times. You worked. You came home. You ate dinner with your family. You went to bed at roughly the same time. Day after day, week after week. The rhythm was comforting. Even when things were hard, even when money was tight or work was frustrating, there was a baseline of predictability that kept you grounded. Marguerite worried about money. Her husband's salary wasn't quite enough. They had to be careful, had to plan, couldn't afford luxuries. But she knew what to expect. She knew when his paycheck would arrive. She knew how much it would be. She knew what the rent cost and what food cost and how much she needed to set aside for other expenses. There were no surprises, no sudden changes, just the steady, predictable flow of life. And that predictability, boring as it might sound, actually reduced stress, gave her a sense of control, a sense that even though things were tight, they were manageable, understandable. And here's where it gets interesting in that drowsy, let your mind wander kind of way. When your life has rhythm and predictability, your body's stress response works the way it's supposed to. Stress hormones spike when you need them, when there's an actual problem to solve, and then they go back down, back to baseline. Your body returns to rest, to normal. But when your life is chaotic and unpredictable, when you never know what's coming next, your stress hormones stay elevated, chronically elevated. Your body thinks it's under threat all the time, and chronic stress does things, bad things. It makes you store fat, especially around your middle. It makes you crave sugar and fat. It disrupts your sleep. It interferes with digestion. It basically tells your body to go into survival mode and stay there. But I haven't told you what was happening to stress levels in America. Because in America, life was getting faster, more chaotic, more unpredictable. The suburbs meant longer commutes, more time in traffic, more variability in how long it took to get anywhere. Jobs were changing. The old model of working for one company your whole life was starting to break down. People were moving more, changing jobs more, living farther from family, losing the support networks that had sustained humans for generations. And nobody was calling this stress. They were calling it progress, opportunity, the American dream. But it was stressful, deeply stressful, in ways that people didn't have language for yet. Marguerite's life was small, contained. She lived in the same neighborhood where she'd grown up, knew the shopkeepers, knew her neighbors, knew the streets. Everything was familiar, safe, known. When she had a problem, she could talk to her mother who lived 3 streets over, or her sister, or her friend from childhood who lived upstairs. There was always someone, always a web of connection and support that caught her when things got hard. She wasn't isolated, wasn't alone, wasn't trying to figure everything out by herself. The community, such as it was, held her, held everyone. Not perfectly, not without friction, but it held. Can you feel how different that is? Can you feel how living in a place where everyone knows you, where you're embedded in a community, where help is always nearby, might reduce stress, might make problems feel more manageable? Let that thought settle into your mind like a warm blanket. Let it make you feel safe and drowsy and calm. Because that's what community does. It calms the nervous system, tells your body that you're not alone, that you're part of something larger, that you don't have to face everything by yourself. But in American suburbs, people were alone. Not entirely alone. They had families, neighbors of a sort, but the deep, multi-generational, everyone knows everyone kind of community was disappearing. People moved for jobs, left their families behind, ended up in suburbs where everyone was new, where nobody had history, where you might wave at your neighbor but you didn't know their name or their story or anything real about them. And when problems came, when stress hit, you dealt with it yourself, or with your immediate family. But that was it. The web was gone. The safety net had vanished, and people were stressed, chronically stressed, always on edge, always worried, never quite able to relax. And chronic stress makes you hungry, makes you crave comfort, makes you reach for food as a way to soothe yourself. Because food, especially sweet or fatty food, triggers pleasure centers in your brain, reduces stress hormones temporarily, feels like relief. So you eat, not because you're physically hungry, but because you're emotionally hungry, stressed and lonely and overwhelmed. And food helps, for a little while, until it doesn't, until you realize you've gained weight and you feel worse and the stress is still there, still waiting, still demanding attention. Marguerite finished her day, walked home, made dinner, ate with her husband, cleaned up, sat down. Her stress level dropped, her body relaxed. She was home, she was safe, she was fine. Tomorrow would be much like today, predictable, manageable, fine. And in America, someone sat in traffic, grinding their teeth, wondering why they felt so anxious all the time, reaching for a candy bar in the glove compartment to make it through the last 10 minutes of the commute. The stress was invisible, but the weight gain wasn't, and nobody was connecting the two. Not yet, not for a long time. Let's talk about something that might sound trivial but isn't: the size of refrigerators. In 1950s France, refrigerators were small, tiny by modern standards, maybe 3 feet tall, maybe 4 if you were lucky. Just a small box with a single door. Inside a few shelves. Enough room for some cheese, some butter, some leftovers, a bottle of milk. That was it. You couldn't store a week's worth of food in there. You couldn't stock up. You couldn't buy in bulk. The refrigerator simply didn't have the capacity, which meant you had to shop frequently, every day, or every other day. You bought what you needed for the next meal or two, bought it fresh, used it quickly, and then you went back and bought more. Marguerite's refrigerator was perhaps 3.5 feet tall, white, humming quietly in the corner of her small kitchen. Inside she kept butter, a piece of cheese wrapped in cloth, some leftover soup from yesterday, a small bottle of milk. That was all that would fit. Well, that and maybe a few eggs and a vegetable or two, but nothing more. No giant containers of yogurt, no multiple bottles of soda, no drawer full of cold cuts and another drawer full of vegetables, just the essentials, the things that needed to stay cold. Everything else, the potatoes and onions and bread and wine, lived outside the refrigerator, in the pantry, or on the counter, or in the cellar. Room temperature, the way food had been stored for centuries. And here's where your mind can really start to soften and drift, because the small refrigerator enforced a rhythm, forced you to shop often, and shopping often meant you ate fresh food, meant you couldn't stock up on processed foods that lasted forever, meant you had to think about what you were going to eat today and tomorrow, not what you might want to eat 3 weeks from now. It kept you connected to your food, to the seasons, to what was available. You couldn't buy strawberries in January because they weren't available. You couldn't buy tomatoes in March because they weren't growing. You ate what was in season, what was there, what made sense. But in America, refrigerators were getting bigger, much bigger. By the mid-1950s, American refrigerators were already 5 or 6 feet tall, and they were about to get bigger still. Freezer compartments were expanding. Soon there would be separate freezers, chest freezers in the garage, refrigerators with 2 doors, 3 doors, ice makers, water dispensers, massive appliances that could hold a month's worth of food or more. And with bigger refrigerators came a different way of shopping. You went once a week, bought everything at once, filled your cart with frozen dinners and canned goods and packages of meat that you'd freeze for later, stocked up, loaded the refrigerator, and then you ate from it all week. Marguerite walked to the market every morning, bought her bread and her vegetables and whatever else she needed, walked home, put the food away, made breakfast. The routine took maybe 40 minutes, start to finish, and it happened every day, 7 days a week, rain or shine. It wasn't a chore exactly, it was just life, just what you did. You bought food, you made food, you ate food, you bought more food. The cycle was constant, daily, unchanging. Can you feel how that daily shopping trip might matter? Can you feel how walking to the market every day and buying fresh food and carrying it home might keep you connected to what you're eating? Might make you more aware of food, more thoughtful about it. Let that idea wash over you gently. Because when you shop once a week and load your refrigerator with food, and then eat from it for days, you lose that connection. Food becomes something that's just there, in the refrigerator, always available. You don't think about where it came from or when it was harvested or whether it's in season. You just open the door and it's there, plastic wrapped and cold and waiting. And with that loss of connection comes a loss of awareness. You eat without thinking. Grab whatever's in the refrigerator without considering whether you're actually hungry or whether this particular food is what your body needs right now. The refrigerator becomes a source of mindless eating, a place you visit when you're bored or stressed or just walking past. You open the door, stare inside, maybe take something out, maybe eat it standing there with the door open, cold air spilling out, not even tasting what you're eating. Just consuming, just filling time, just doing something with your hands and your mouth because you don't know what else to do. Marguerite never ate standing up, never ate from the refrigerator, never even thought to do such a thing. When she was hungry, she sat down at the table, put food on a plate, ate it with a fork, paid attention, tasted it, and when she was done, closed the refrigerator, walked away, didn't think about food again until the next meal. The small refrigerator didn't tempt her, didn't call to her. It was just a cold box, nothing more. But American refrigerators were becoming a problem, a source of constant temptation, constant possibility. They were always full, always offering options, always suggesting that maybe you should eat something, even if you weren't hungry, even if you'd just eaten an hour ago. The food was there, cold and convenient and waiting. Why not have a snack? Why not have another snack? Why not have another? The refrigerator didn't judge, didn't stop you, just kept offering, kept giving, kept enabling a pattern of eating that had nothing to do with hunger and everything to do with availability. And slowly, steadily, without anyone quite noticing how or when it happened, Eating became something you did all the time. Not just at meals, not just when you were hungry, but constantly. Whenever you passed the refrigerator, whenever you had a moment, whenever you felt bored or stressed or just restless, the food was there, so you ate it. And the small refrigerators in France, the ones that barely held enough for a day or two, suddenly seemed like a feature, not a limitation, a feature that enforced restraint, that prevented excess, that kept eating contained to mealtimes, where it belonged. But nobody in America was thinking about refrigerator size. Nobody was connecting the dots between bigger refrigerators and bigger people. It was just progress, just convenience, just the modern world making life easier, but not better, not healthier, not happier, just easier. Now let's talk about something you probably don't want to talk about: work. In 1950s France, most people had physical jobs, or at least jobs that required some physical activity. You might work in a shop, standing all day, or in a factory, moving around, operating machines, carrying things, or in an office. But even office workers walked to file rooms, walked to deliver messages, walked to other departments. There were no computers, no email. If you needed to communicate with someone, you walked to their desk. If you needed a file, you walked to the filing cabinet. The workday was punctuated by movement, small movements, brief walks, stairs climbed, not dramatic, not exercise, just movement woven into the fabric of work. Marguerite sat at a desk most of the day, typing insurance forms, filing paperwork, answering the phone. But she got up frequently, walked to the filing room to put forms away, walked to her supervisor's office to ask a question, walked to the supply closet to get more paper, walked to the kitchen to make coffee. Small trips, maybe 30 or 40 times a day, each one only taking a minute or two, but adding up, keeping her body from settling into complete stillness, keeping her joints moving, her muscles engaged, her blood flowing. And here's the part where you can let your eyes close and just listen, where you can feel the information seeping in without effort. Because those small movements throughout the day, those brief moments of activity, they mattered more than anyone realized. They kept your metabolism active, kept your body in a state of mild alertness instead of complete rest, prevented the deep physical stagnation that comes from sitting for hours without moving. Your body is not designed to be still for long periods. It's designed to move, frequently, in small ways, throughout the day. That's how humans lived for hundreds of thousands of years. Moving, hunting, gathering, walking, bending, reaching. Constant low-level activity punctuated by periods of rest. But American work was changing. Office work was becoming the norm, and office work, especially as it evolved in the 1950s and beyond, meant sitting. Sitting for long stretches, 8 hours a day, with maybe a lunch break where you also sat, and bathroom breaks where you walked 50 feet and then sat again. The rest of the time you were in your chair, at your desk, still, completely still, your body slowly shutting down its metabolism, conserving energy, preparing for the activity that never came. And this stillness, this forced inactivity, had consequences. Your muscles weakened, your joints stiffened, your circulation slowed. Your body started storing more energy as fat because, from its perspective, if you're not moving, you must not need that energy right now. Better save it for later. Better be conservative. Better assume this is a lean time. Except it wasn't a lean time. Food was everywhere, abundant, constant. But your body didn't know that. It just knew you weren't moving. So it prepared, stored, adapted to a reality of stillness. Marguerite walked home from work, 40 minutes of movement after a day of mostly sitting. Her body appreciated it, needed it, used it to recalibrate, to remember that it was capable of movement, that it had a purpose beyond sitting. By the time she arrived home, her body felt alive again, ready for the evening, ready to cook dinner and move around the kitchen and live. Can you feel yourself sinking deeper into comfort? Can you feel how this story is carrying you towards sleep without effort? Good. Stay there. Let it happen. Because we're building to something. Slowly, gently, like the way Marguerite's life unfolded. One day at a time. One small choice at a time. One walk at a time. Nothing dramatic. Nothing revolutionary. Just the steady accumulation of small, reasonable, sustainable habits that happen to keep her healthy, without her even trying. Meanwhile, in America, someone sat at their desk for 8 hours, drove home for 45 minutes, also sitting, sat down to eat dinner in front of the television, sat there for another 3 hours watching shows, and then went to bed. The entire day spent sitting, moving only when absolutely necessary, and wondering, vaguely, without quite articulating it, why they felt so tired all the time, why their back hurt, why their legs felt weak, why they gained weight even though they weren't eating that much, or so they thought. The body keeps score, always. It remembers every hour spent sitting, every day without significant movement, every week of stillness, and it adapts, becomes efficient at stillness, becomes good at conserving energy, becomes, essentially, a sitting machine, optimized for inactivity, which is the opposite of what a human body is supposed to be, the opposite of what it was designed for, the opposite of health. But nobody was measuring hours spent sitting. Nobody was tracking movement throughout the day. Nobody was connecting workplace stillness with expanding waistlines. Not yet. That would come later. Much later. After decades of damage. After millions of people developed problems that could have been prevented by something as simple as standing up and walking around a few times an hour. Simple. But not easy. Not in a world designed for sitting. Not in a culture that valued productivity over health. Not in a system that rewarded stillness and punished movement. Marguerite stood up from her desk, stretched, walked to the filing room, felt her body wake up slightly, felt the blood move through her legs, felt alive, returned to her desk, sat down, went back to work. And in America, someone sat, and sat, and sat, and sat, until sitting was all they knew. Let's talk about sleep for a minute, because sleep matters more than most people realize. In 1950s France, people went to bed early, not because they wanted to, not because they were trying to be healthy, but because there wasn't much else to do. Television was new. Most people didn't have one yet, and even if you did, there were only a couple of channels. Programming ended around 10 or 11 at night. The screen went dark. That was it. No late-night shows, no endless streaming options, no scrolling through your phone until 2 in the morning. When the TV went off, you went to bed. Simple as that. You might read for a bit, might talk with your spouse, might just lie there thinking. But you were in bed, lights off, trying to sleep. Marguerite went to bed around 10:30 most nights, sometimes 11 if she'd been visiting a neighbor, or if her husband wanted to talk about something. But usually 10:30. She'd wash her face, put on her nightgown, get into bed. The room was dark, truly dark. No streetlights blazing through the window, no glow from electronic devices, no little LED lights from phone chargers or alarm clocks. Just darkness. Complete darkness. The way night was supposed to be. And in that darkness, her body did what it was designed to do. Produced melatonin. Relaxed. Drifted towards sleep. And here's the part where you can really feel yourself floating. Where the story and your own experience start to blur together. Because Marguerite slept 8 hours most nights. Sometimes 9. Not because she was lazy or unmotivated. But because that's how much sleep her body needed. That's how much sleep every human body needs. 8 hours. Maybe a little less. Maybe a little more. But somewhere in that range. Enough time for your body to repair itself. To process the day. To consolidate memories. To regulate hormones. To do all the invisible work that keeps you healthy and functional and alive. But I haven't told you what sleep deprivation does to your body. Because this is important. This is the kind of important that makes you want to pull your blanket up a little higher and appreciate the fact that you're about to get some sleep. When you don't sleep enough, your body produces more ghrelin and less leptin. Ghrelin makes you hungry. Leptin makes you feel full. So less sleep means more hunger and less satiety. Which means you eat more. You eat more, but you enjoy it less. You're tired. Everything feels harder. Food becomes a way to stay awake. To feel better. To cope. You reach for sugar and caffeine and anything that might give you energy. And your body, confused and exhausted, stores more of what you eat as fat instead of burning it for energy. Because it thinks something is wrong. Thinks you're under threat. Thinks it needs to conserve resources. Marguerite woke up around 6:30. Felt rested. Not energized exactly. Not bouncing out of bed with enthusiasm. Just rested. Normal. Ready for the day. She made coffee. Ate her bread and butter. Started her routine. And her body, well rested and restored, functioned the way it was supposed to. Her appetite was normal. Her energy was steady. Her metabolism hummed along efficiently. Everything worked. Not perfectly, but well enough. Can you imagine sleeping 8 hours every night? Can you imagine going to bed when you're tired and waking up when you're rested? It probably sounds impossible. Sounds like a luxury you can't afford. But here's the thing, and let this settle into your mind like a soft pillow. Sleep isn't a luxury. It's not optional. It's not something you can cheat on and expect no consequences. Your body needs sleep the way it needs food and water and air. It's not negotiable. And when you don't get enough, everything suffers. Your health, your weight, your mood, your ability to think clearly, your relationships, everything. But in America, sleep was already being sacrificed. The culture was changing, becoming more fast-paced, more demanding, more ambitious. Sleep was for the weak. Sleep was wasted time. You could sleep when you were dead. Better to stay up late, get more done, watch more TV, be productive, be busy, be anything except asleep. And people were sleeping less. 6 hours a night, 5. Some people even bragged about how little sleep they needed. 4 hours and they were fine. They said, they believed. But their bodies told a different story. Their expanding waistlines told a different story. Their constant fatigue told a different story. Marguerite slept in complete darkness and complete quiet. Her apartment was on a small street. Few cars passed by. No traffic noise. No sirens. No neighbors playing loud music. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that lets your brain actually rest. Actually shut down. Actually stop processing information and just be. Her bedroom was cool. She had a window that she opened slightly, even in winter. Fresh air circulating. The temperature dropping. Her body cooling down the way it was supposed to at night. Everything working together to create the conditions for deep, restorative sleep. And in American suburbs, bedrooms were getting brighter. Street lights were getting brighter. Houses were filling with devices that glowed and hummed and buzzed all night. Alarm clocks with bright red numbers. Phone chargers with little lights. Smoke detectors with blinking LEDs. All of it adding up to a room that was never quite dark, never quite quiet, never quite conducive to real sleep. And people tossed and turned and woke up feeling tired and didn't understand why. Blamed stress, blamed age, blamed anything except the environment they'd created. The light pollution and noise pollution and constant stimulation that prevented their brains from ever fully shutting down. Marguerite woke up, felt the morning light on her face, opened her eyes, lay there for a moment, letting sleep fade naturally. No alarm clock shocking her awake, no jarring noise pulling her out of deep sleep before her body was ready. Just the gentle transition from sleep to waking. Natural, easy, the way humans had woken up for thousands of years. With the light, with the birds, with the natural rhythm of day and night. And in America, someone's alarm clock blared, jolted them awake. They hit snooze. The alarm blared again. They hit snooze again. Finally dragged themselves out of bed feeling exhausted. Stumbled to the kitchen for coffee. Strong coffee. Lots of it. Trying to force their body into alertness. Fighting against every signal their body was sending. Tired. Still tired. Need more sleep. But there was no more sleep. There was work. There were obligations. There was life. So they drank their coffee and pushed through. Day after day after day. And wondered why they could never seem to lose weight. Why they were always hungry. Why they craved sugar constantly. Why everything felt so hard. The answer was so simple, so obvious, so completely ignored. Sleep. They needed sleep. Real sleep. 8 hours of it. In darkness. In quiet. Every night. But that seemed impossible. Seemed unrealistic. Seemed like something from another time. Another world. Another life. Now let's talk about something that sounds almost quaint. Sunday dinner. In 1950s France, Sunday was different. Sunday was sacred, not in a religious way necessarily, though many people did go to church, but sacred in the sense that it was protected time, family time, time that belonged to no one else. Shops were closed, most people didn't work. The whole day had a different rhythm, slower, quieter, more intentional. And at the centre of Sunday was dinner. Not lunch, though lunch was also important, but dinner, the big meal. The meal that took hours to prepare and hours to eat and hours to clean up after. The meal that brought everyone together. Marguerite started preparing Sunday dinner around 2 in the afternoon. Sometimes earlier, she made something special. Something that took time. A roast maybe, or a stew that had been simmering since morning, or a complicated dish that her mother had taught her how to make. Nothing fancy exactly. Nothing that required ingredients she couldn't afford. Just good food. Real food, prepared with care. She peeled potatoes, trimmed vegetables, made a sauce from scratch. Everything slow, everything done properly. No shortcuts, no convenience foods, just her hands and the ingredients and time. Lots of time. And here's where you can really let yourself drift, where the story becomes a kind of meditation on time and food and care, because Marguerite wasn't rushing, wasn't stressed about getting dinner done quickly so she could move on to the next thing. There was no next thing. This was the thing. This was Sunday. This was what Sunday was for. Making food, being with family, taking time. She chopped onions slowly, stirred the sauce regularly, checked on the roast, made adjustments, tasted, added salt, tasted again, added a little butter. Better. The whole process was a kind of dance, rhythmic, familiar, satisfying in itself even before anyone ate anything. By 6 or 7 in the evening, dinner was ready. The table was set, the family gathered, Marguerite's husband, her 2 children, sometimes her mother or her sister, sometimes a neighbour. The table was full, plates and glasses and serving dishes. The food was served. Everyone helped themselves, passed dishes, poured wine, and then they ate, slowly, talking between bites, laughing, arguing about something inconsequential, telling stories. The meal stretched on, an hour, 2 hours, sometimes longer. Nobody was in a hurry, nobody had anywhere else to be. This was it. This was the main event of the week. Can you feel how different that is from a weeknight dinner? Can you feel how taking hours to prepare and eat a meal might change your relationship with food? Might make it feel more important, more central, more worthy of attention and care? Let that feeling wash over you. Let it make you drowsy and content. Because Sunday dinner wasn't just about eating. It was about family, about connection, about pausing in the endless rush of life and actually being present with the people you loved, about creating a memory, about maintaining a tradition, about doing something that mattered even though it didn't produce anything, didn't accomplish anything, just existed for its own sake. But I haven't told you what this meant for how Marguerite thought about food, because when you spend 3 hours making dinner and 2 hours eating it and an hour cleaning up after, food becomes important, becomes something you respect, something you value, something you don't waste. You don't throw food away after putting that much time and care into it. You don't leave things on your plate. You don't take more than you can eat. You savor every bite because you know how much work went into it. You appreciate it. And that appreciation, that respect for food, it carried over into the rest of the week, into every meal, into every bite. Meanwhile, in America, Sunday dinner was disappearing. Or rather, it was becoming less special, less distinct from any other meal. People still gathered on Sundays, sometimes, still tried to make it special. But it was getting harder. There were more distractions, more commitments, more things pulling families in different directions, and the meal itself was changing, becoming easier, more convenient. You could buy a pre-cooked rotisserie chicken from the supermarket, heat up some frozen vegetables, make instant mashed potatoes, and that was dinner, done in 30 minutes instead of 3 hours. Efficient, modern, better, or so people told themselves. But something was lost in that efficiency, something intangible but important. The time spent preparing food was also time spent thinking about food, anticipating the meal, building desire for it, so that when you finally sat down to eat, you were ready, hungry, eager, and the food tasted better because you'd been thinking about it for hours, because you'd put yourself into it, because it meant something. Whereas a meal that came together in 30 minutes didn't have that build-up, didn't have that anticipation. You just threw it together and ate it and moved on. No ceremony, no ritual, no meaning, just fuel, just consumption. Marguerite cleared the table slowly, stacked the plates, scraped the leftovers into a container for tomorrow. There wasn't much left. Everyone had eaten well, had eaten enough, had enjoyed the food and each other's company. She washed the dishes by hand, slowly, no dishwasher, just her hands in warm soapy water, the repetitive motion, the simple task, her mind wandering, thinking about the week ahead, about nothing in particular, just being, just finishing the day, just closing out Sunday in the same gentle way it had unfolded. And by the time she went to bed, she felt satisfied, not just from the food, but from the day, from the time spent, from the care given and received, from the connections reinforced, from the tradition upheld, from doing something the way it had always been done, the way it should be done, the way that felt right. And in America, someone ate dinner in front of the TV, barely tasted it, finished in 20 minutes, got up for seconds, ate those too, still felt vaguely unsatisfied, vaguely empty, looking for something they couldn't quite name, looking for Sunday dinner, looking for time, looking for care, looking for meaning. No way. Looking for something that had been there all along but had somehow slipped away when nobody was paying attention. Let's talk about something that might sound strange, the absence of choice. In 1950s France, there weren't many options when it came to food. You went to the market and bought what was available. In winter, that meant root vegetables, potatoes, carrots, onions, turnips, leeks, some cabbage, maybe some dried beans. That was it. No strawberries flown in from somewhere warm, no asparagus from the other hemisphere, no exotic fruits you'd never heard of, just what grew locally, what was in season, what made sense. And in a strange way, this limited choice made life simpler, made decisions easier. You didn't stand in the produce section overwhelmed by 30 types of apples. You bought the apples that were there, or you didn't buy apples at all because it wasn't apple season. Marguerite walked through the market, looked at what was available, bought some potatoes, some leeks, some carrots, planned her meals around what she'd bought, made soup probably, or a stew, something that used these particular vegetables. She didn't wish for something else, didn't feel deprived because she couldn't buy tomatoes in January. Tomatoes weren't supposed to exist in January. The idea wouldn't have occurred to her. You ate what was available when it was available. That was just how things worked, how they'd always worked, how they were supposed to work. And here's the part that'll make your mind go soft and quiet. When you don't have many choices, you don't waste energy making decisions. You don't stand in the grocery store for 20 minutes trying to decide which type of yogurt to buy. You don't compare 17 brands of pasta sauce. You don't experience decision fatigue. You just buy what's there, take it home, make something with it, move on. Your brain isn't exhausted from constant choice, constant optimization, constant trying to make the perfect decision. You just live, just eat, just exist, without the burden of infinite options. But in America, choice was exploding. Supermarkets were getting bigger, aisles were getting longer, products were multiplying. Where there used to be one brand of cereal, now there were 5, then 10, then 20. Where there used to be plain yogurt, now there was low-fat yogurt and non-fat yogurt and Greek yogurt and yogurt with fruit on the bottom and yogurt with fruit mixed in and yogurt in every flavor imaginable, and every single purchase required a decision. Required you to evaluate options, compare prices, read labels, make choices. Hundreds of choices, thousands of choices, every single time you went to the store. And decision fatigue is real, is exhausting, uses up mental energy. And when your brain is tired from making decisions all day, it makes worse decisions, takes shortcuts, reaches for what's familiar, or what's advertised the most, or what's easiest. Doesn't have the energy to read labels or compare ingredients, or think about what you actually need. Just grabs something, anything, moves on to the next decision, and the next, and the next, until you get home and realize you bought things you didn't need, and didn't buy things you did need, and you're too tired to care. Marguerite bought her vegetables, walked home, put them away. That was it. 5 minutes of decision-making, maybe 10, and then she was done. Her brain was free to think about other things, to rest, to exist without the constant pressure of optimization. She made soup with the vegetables she'd bought. The soup was good, not the best soup possible, not optimized, not compared against 17 other potential soups, just good, good enough, satisfying, done. Can you feel how restful that sounds? Can you feel how the absence of choice might actually be a gift? Let your mind relax into that idea. Let it make you drowsy and content. Because in the modern world, we've been sold the idea that more choice is always better, that freedom means infinite options, that having 30 types of jam to choose from makes life richer. But it doesn't. It makes life more complicated, more exhausting, more overwhelming, and it doesn't make the jam taste any better. But here's what's really interesting. The part that connects back to weight and health and all the things we've been circling around. When you have fewer choices, you eat less. Studies have proven this, though nobody needed studies to prove it. It's obvious if you think about it. When there's one option for dessert, you either eat it or you don't. When there are 20 options, you want to try them all, want to compare them, want to make sure you didn't miss the best one. So you eat more, sample more, consume more. Not because you're hungrier, but because the options are there, because scarcity has been replaced by abundance, and your brain doesn't know how to handle abundance. Your brain evolved for scarcity, knows how to deal with limited options, doesn't know what to do when everything is available all the time. Marguerite had one type of cheese in her refrigerator. One. Not because she couldn't afford variety, but because that's what made sense. She bought cheese, used it, bought more when she ran out. Sometimes it was camembert, sometimes it was a different cheese, but only one at a time. One option. Simple, clear. And that one cheese tasted better because it was the only cheese. Because she gave it her full attention. Because she wasn't comparing it to 3 other cheeses, or wishing she'd bought something else. It was just cheese, and it was good. Meanwhile, in American refrigerators there were multiple cheeses, multiple types of milk, multiple types of everything, and people stood in front of their open refrigerators staring at all the options, unable to decide what to eat, ultimately grabbing a bit of several things, not fully enjoying any of them, just consuming, just filling time, just trying to satisfy a hunger that had nothing to do with food, had everything to do with too much choice, creating a feeling of restless dissatisfaction that could never be filled no matter how much you ate. Marguerite closed her cupboard, had everything she needed, felt content, felt satisfied with her simple options, felt no desire for more, no sense that she was missing out, no FOMO, just contentment, just enough. And in America, someone scrolled through a meal delivery app with 47 restaurant options, unable to choose, ultimately ordering too much food, eating too much of it, still feeling somehow unsatisfied. Drowning in choice, starving for simplicity, never quite connecting the two. Now let's talk about laundry. Yes, laundry. Stay with me. This matters. In 1950s France, laundry was an event, not a daily thing, not something you did whenever you felt like it, a weekly thing, usually Monday. Monday was laundry day, had been for generations, would continue to be for years to come. You gathered all the dirty clothes from the week, sorted them, filled a large basin or sink with water, added soap, washed each item by hand, scrubbed, wrung out the water, rinsed, wrung out again, hung everything to dry. The whole process took hours, literal hours. It was hard work, physical work, the kind of work that made your arms ache and your back hurt and your hands wrinkled and raw. Marguerite did laundry every Monday morning, started around 7, finished around noon. 5 hours of standing and bending and scrubbing and wringing. Her arms moved constantly, her back bent and straightened, her hands gripped and twisted and squeezed. It wasn't exercise, wasn't something she chose to do for fitness, just work, necessary work, work that had to be done. But her body didn't know the difference between exercise and work. It just knew movement, knew effort, knew muscles contracting and energy being burned. And 5 hours of laundry burned a lot of energy, maybe 500 calories, maybe more, every single week. And here's where your mind can really drift into that comfortable, drowsy place, because this was true of everything. Laundry by hand burned calories, scrubbing floors burned calories, beating rugs burned calories, hanging clothes to dry burned calories, cooking from scratch burned calories, walking to the market burned calories, carrying groceries burned calories, climbing stairs burned calories. Every single task of daily life required physical effort, required movement, required your body to work, and all of it added up, not to intentional exercise, not to going to the gym, just to life, to the ordinary everyday tasks that filled a day and kept a body moving and burning energy without anyone thinking about it or counting it or even noticing it. But in America, appliances were taking over. Washing machines were becoming standard. You loaded your clothes, added detergent, pressed a button, walked away. The machine did the work. You came back 30 minutes later, moved the clothes to the dryer, pressed another button, walked away again. An hour later, the clothes were clean and dry. Total physical effort on your part, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 50 calories burned, versus 5 hours and 500 calories. The difference was enormous. And this was just laundry. Every other household task was following the same pattern, becoming mechanized, becoming easy, becoming something that required almost no physical effort at all. Marguerite hung her laundry on a line in the courtyard behind her building, carried the wet clothes down 5 flights of stairs, hung each piece carefully, pinned it in place. When it was dry, she took it down, carried it back up 5 flights of stairs, folded it, put it away. More movement, more effort, more calories burned. Not because she was trying to exercise, just because that's what you did. That's how laundry worked. You washed it, you hung it, you took it down, you put it away. Simple, physical, necessary. Can you imagine doing laundry by hand every week? Can you imagine spending 5 hours scrubbing and wringing and hanging? It probably sounds terrible, sounds exhausting, sounds like something you'd never want to do. But here's the thing. Marguerite didn't think about it that way. It was just Monday, just laundry day, just what happened every week. She didn't dread it particularly, didn't love it either. It was just work, just part of life. And when it was done, she felt satisfied, felt accomplished, felt like she'd done something real, something tangible, something that mattered. Whereas pushing a button on a washing machine doesn't feel like anything, doesn't feel like accomplishment, doesn't give you any sense of satisfaction. It's just done, by a machine, without your participation, without your effort. And there's something hollow about that, something that leaves you feeling like you haven't really done anything even though the task is complete. Your body got no workout, your muscles didn't engage, you didn't burn any meaningful calories, you just pressed a button and moved on. And your body, deprived of the movement it was expecting, stayed sluggish, stayed in low power mode, kept storing energy instead of burning it. and this pattern repeated across every aspect of domestic life. Vacuum cleaners replaced brooms and made cleaning easier but less physical. Dishwashers replaced hand-washing dishes. Frozen dinners replaced cooking from scratch. Electric mixers replaced hand mixing. Every innovation designed to save time and effort actually saved movement and calorie expenditure, made life easier, made bodies lazier, made people heavier. Not intentionally, not as some kind of conspiracy, just as an unintended consequence of progress, of making things more convenient, more efficient, more modern. Marguerite finished her laundry, felt tired, a good tired, the kind that comes from physical work, the kind that makes lunch taste better, and makes you appreciate sitting down afterward, the kind that tells you you've earned your rest. She made lunch, ate it slowly. Her body thanked her with steady energy throughout the afternoon. Her metabolism hummed along efficiently, processing the food she'd eaten, using the energy her muscles had demanded during all that scrubbing and wringing and carrying. And in America, someone pressed a button, walked away, sat on the couch, scrolled through their phone, felt restless but not tired, not satisfied, not accomplished, just waiting. Waiting for the machine to finish, waiting for something to happen, waiting for a feeling that never came. The convenience was undeniable, but the cost was invisible, hidden in the gradual accumulation of unused calories, unused muscles, unused energy that had nowhere to go except into storage, into fat, into weight gain that seemed to come from nowhere, from nothing, from just living a modern life. A modern, convenient, sedentary life, where everything was easy and nothing moved. Let's talk about something simple, the shape of a day. In 1950s France, days had a shape, a structure, a rhythm that everyone followed because it was just how things were done. You woke with the light, made coffee, ate a small breakfast, went to work, came home for lunch, rested briefly, went back to work, came home for dinner, spent the evening quietly, went to bed. The next day you did it again, same shape, same rhythm, and your body adapted to this rhythm. Knew when to be alert, knew when to digest food, knew when to rest. Everything synchronized, everything in harmony, not perfect harmony, but close enough. Marguerite's days were almost identical. Monday through Friday, the same routine, same wake-up time, same breakfast, same walk to work, same lunch break, same walk home, same dinner time, same bedtime. The weekends were slightly different. Saturday she did errands, Sunday was for family and rest. But even those variations followed a pattern, a predictable, repeating pattern. And her body, knowing what to expect, functioned efficiently within that pattern. Her metabolism worked consistently, her energy levels were steady, her sleep was deep, her hunger appeared at regular intervals. Everything worked together because everything happened at regular times. And here's where you can feel yourself sinking deeper into the story, deeper into comfort, deeper towards sleep. Because there's something deeply calming about predictability, about knowing what comes next, about not having to make constant decisions about when to eat, or when to sleep, or when to rest. The structure does that for you. Removes the burden of choice, removes the anxiety of uncertainty. You just follow the rhythm, let it carry you through the day, through the week, through life. And your body rewards you for that consistency by functioning smoothly, by not fighting you, by working with you instead of against you. But in America, the shape of the day was dissolving, becoming irregular, unpredictable, chaotic. Some people worked 9 to 5, some worked shifts, some worked weekends, some worked nights. Dinner might be at 6 one day and 8 the next. Bedtime might be 10, or midnight, or 2 in the morning, depending on what was on TV or what work you brought home. Breakfast might happen or might not. Lunch might be at noon or might be at 3 or might be skipped entirely. There was no rhythm, no pattern, just chaos. And your body, trying desperately to adapt to this chaos, couldn't figure out when food was coming, couldn't regulate hunger properly, couldn't sleep deeply because it didn't know when sleep would happen. Everything became dysregulated, off balance, confused. Marguerite woke at 6:30, every day. 6:30. Her body knew, her hormones knew. By 6:20 she was already starting to wake naturally. By 6:30 she was alert, ready for the day. She didn't need an alarm clock. Her body was the alarm clock, trained by years of consistency, years of the same rhythm, and she didn't feel tired during the day, didn't need multiple cups of coffee, didn't experience that 3 p.m. crash that everyone seemed to complain about. Her energy was steady, consistent, reliable. Because her body knew the plan, knew the schedule, could allocate resources appropriately. Can you feel how restful that sounds? Can you feel how your own body might crave that kind of consistency, that kind of predictability? Let that feeling wash over you. Let it make you drowsy and comfortable and safe, because your body wants rhythm, wants structure, wants to know what's coming next. It evolved over millions of years with a very consistent rhythm, day and night, light and dark, summer and winter, predictable patterns that repeated endlessly. And in that predictability, your body learned to function optimally, to prepare for what was coming, to use energy efficiently, to rest deeply. But modern life has destroyed that rhythm, blurred the lines between day and night, between work and rest, between eating times and non-eating times, between weekday and weekend. Everything runs together, everything happens at random times, and your body, confused and stressed, tries to adapt but can't. Not really, not fully, so it stays in a state of low-level stress all the time, always slightly on edge, always slightly dysregulated, always slightly off. And that chronic dysregulation leads to all sorts of problems: weight gain, poor sleep, low energy, mood issues, digestive problems. All of it stemming from the simple fact that your life has no consistent rhythm anymore, no predictable pattern, no shape. Marguerite ate lunch at noon, every day, noon. Her body started producing digestive enzymes around 11:45, started making her feel hungry around 11:50. By noon she was ready to eat, really ready. The food tasted better because she was truly hungry, and her body processed it efficiently because it was expecting it, because this was lunchtime. This was when lunch happened, always, without fail. The consistency allowed her body to optimize everything, to be ready, to function well. Meanwhile, in America, someone ate lunch at 11:30 one day because they had a meeting at 1, ate at 2 the next day because they were busy, skipped it entirely the day after because they weren't hungry, or forgot, or were too stressed, and their body, trying to figure out when food was coming, eventually gave up trying to predict anything, just stayed in a state of constant readiness, constant alertness, constant stress, producing hunger hormones randomly, craving food at odd times, never quite sure when the next meal would arrive, never able to settle into a rhythm, never able to relax. And that constant state of alert used energy, wasted energy, created inefficiency, made the body store more and burn less, because it couldn't predict anything, couldn't plan, couldn't optimize, just had to stay ready for anything at any time, which is exhausting, metabolically exhausting. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't feel like physical tiredness, but manifests as weight gain and low energy, and constant hunger, and all the other symptoms of a body that's confused and stressed, and trying desperately to cope with a life that has no pattern, no rhythm, no shape. Marguerite went to bed at 10:30, woke at 6:30, 8 hours, every night. Her body knew the schedule, optimized for it, used those 8 hours efficiently to repair and restore and prepare for the next day. She woke feeling rested because she was rested, because her body had gotten what it needed, what it expected, what it had learned to rely on. And in America, someone went to bed at 11 one night, 1:30 the next, 10 the night after, woke at 6, or 7 or 8, depending on when they had to work, got 5 hours of sleep one night, 7 the next, 6 the next. And their body, never knowing what to expect, never able to establish a rhythm, just stayed tired, chronically tired. The kind of tired that sleep didn't fix because the problem wasn't the amount of sleep, it was the inconsistency, the chaos, the lack of pattern. And tired bodies gain weight, store fat, crave sugar, make poor decisions. The science is clear on this, has been for decades, but nobody thinks about it. Nobody connects their irregular sleep schedule to their expanding waistline. Nobody sees the pattern, or the lack of pattern. Nobody except Marguerite, who never thought about any of this at all, who just lived, who just followed the rhythm that everyone around her followed, who just existed within a structure that kept her healthy, without her even trying, without her even knowing. Now let's talk about eating alone versus eating together. In 1950s France, eating alone was rare, almost unheard of. You ate with your family, with your co-workers, with friends, with neighbors, but you didn't eat alone. Even if you lived alone, you'd often eat at a cafe where other people were also eating, where you could exchange a few words with the waiter, or a regular at the next table. Meals were social events, communal activities, things you did with other people, not in isolation, not staring at a wall or a screen, with people, always with people. Marguerite ate every meal with someone, breakfast with her husband, lunch with co-workers at a cafe near her office, dinner with her husband and children. Even her afternoon coffee, when she had one, was often shared with a neighbor or a friend. She almost never put food in her mouth when she was alone, and this mattered. This mattered more than you might think, because when you eat with other people, you eat differently, you eat more slowly, you pause between bites to talk, to listen, to engage. You're not focused solely on the food, you're focused on the conversation, on the people, on the social experience. And as a result, you eat less. You enjoy it more, but you eat less. And here's the part that'll make your eyelids heavy. When you're eating and talking at the same time, your brain has time to register fullness, has time to receive the signal from your stomach that says, okay, that's enough. Because that signal takes 20 minutes. 20 minutes from when you start eating to when your brain fully registers that you're full. If you eat fast, you can consume way more food than you need before that signal arrives. But if you eat slowly, talking and pausing and engaging, the signal arrives while you're still eating, and you stop, naturally, without effort, without willpower. You just stop because you're full, because your brain finally knows you're full. But I haven't told you the most important part yet. Eating with other people is pleasurable in a way that eating alone isn't. The social connection satisfies something deep in your brain, something primal. Humans are social animals. We're meant to eat together. It's how we've eaten for hundreds of thousands of years, gathered around fires, sharing food, talking, bonding. And when you eat this way, the meal feels complete, feels satisfying, not just because of the food, but because of the experience, the connection, the feeling of belonging, of being part of something. And that satisfaction prevents you from eating more later, prevents you from snacking or going back for seconds, or feeling like something is missing, because nothing is missing. You got what you needed, food and connection, both at the same time. Marguerite sat at the table with her family, ate slowly, told her husband about her day, listened to her children talk about school, laughed at something funny, paused to take a sip of wine, took another bite. The meal stretched on, 45 minutes, an hour, and by the end she felt full, satisfied, content, ready to stop eating, ready to clear the table and move on to the next part of the evening. The meal was complete, in every sense of the word. Can you imagine eating every meal with other people? Can you imagine never eating alone, never eating in front of a screen, never shoveling food into your mouth while doing something else? It probably sounds impossible, sounds inconvenient, sounds like something that would take too much time. But here's the thing, it doesn't take more time. You're going to eat anyway. You're going to spend 30 minutes or an hour eating regardless. The only difference is whether you do it alone or with others, whether you do it while staring at a screen or while engaging with people. The time is the same. The experience is completely different. But in America, eating alone was becoming normal, common, expected. You grabbed breakfast on the way to work, ate it in your car, alone. You ate lunch at your desk, alone, or in your car again, or standing in your kitchen, alone. You ate dinner in front of the TV, technically with your family maybe, but not really, not engaging, not talking, just watching, just consuming food and content simultaneously, alone together, which is somehow lonelier than being actually alone. And when you eat alone, you eat faster, you eat more, you don't taste the food as much, don't enjoy it as much. The meal doesn't satisfy the deep social need that humans have. So you eat, and you finish, and you still feel empty. Not physically hungry, but emotionally empty, socially empty. So you eat more. Go back for seconds, grab a snack an hour later, keep eating, trying to fill a hole that food can't fill, trying to satisfy a hunger that has nothing to do with your stomach, and everything to do with your need for connection. Marguerite would have found eating alone bizarre, sad even. Why would you eat alone when you could eat with people? What would be the point? Food was meant to be shared. Meals were meant to be communal. This wasn't a rule she followed consciously. It was just how things were, how they'd always been, how everyone she knew did things. You set the table. You called people to eat. You sat down together. You ate. You talked. You connected. And then you cleared the table together and went about your evening. Simple, natural, human. But in America, the table was being abandoned. People were eating in cars, and at desks, and on couches, eating while watching TV, or scrolling phones, or reading, or working. Eating while doing anything except the one thing that makes eating satisfying, which is being present with other people, being engaged in conversation, being connected. And the result was a population that ate more but enjoyed it less, that consumed more but felt less satisfied, that gained weight while feeling emotionally starved. Marguerite finished her dinner, put down her fork, felt full and content. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, then she stood up, started clearing plates. Her daughter helped. They moved around the kitchen together, washing, drying, putting away, working in comfortable silence punctuated by occasional comments, connected, together. The meal was over, but the togetherness continued, naturally, easily, the way it had always been. And somewhere in America, someone finished eating alone in front of the TV, got up immediately, felt vaguely dissatisfied, went to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, stared inside, looking for something, not food, something else, something they couldn't name, something that wasn't there, something they'd lost without even realizing it was gone. Let's talk about walking after meals for a minute. In 1950s France, after dinner, people walked, not because they were trying to exercise, not because they'd read somewhere that walking aids digestion, just because that's what you did. The meal was over, the dishes were done, the evening was mild, or cold, or rainy, but you walked anyway, down the street, around the block, to the corner and back, just a short walk, 10 minutes, 15, nothing strenuous, just movement, just being outside, just transitioning from dinner to the rest of the evening, a ritual, a habit, a thing everyone did without thinking about it. Marguerite and her husband walked almost every evening after dinner, sometimes just the two of them, sometimes with the children, sometimes they'd run into neighbours and walk together for a bit. The walk was slow, leisurely. They talked about small things, the weather, something that had happened at work, plans for the weekend, nothing important, nothing urgent, just conversation, just being together, just moving. And by the time they returned home, maybe 20 minutes later, their bodies had done something important, something their bodies needed. They'd moved after eating. They'd helped their blood sugar stabilize. They'd aided digestion. They'd burned a few calories. Nothing dramatic, just enough, just right. And here's where your mind can really drift into that soft, comfortable space where sleep is waiting. Because walking after eating matters. Your blood sugar spikes after a meal. That's normal. That's expected. But if you sit still after eating, especially if you sit still for hours, that spike stays high for longer. Your body has to work harder to bring it back down, has to produce more insulin, and over time, over years of high post-meal blood sugar spikes, your body becomes less sensitive to insulin, becomes less efficient at processing glucose, becomes, eventually, pre-diabetic or diabetic. But if you walk after eating, even just for 10 or 15 minutes, your muscles use some of that glucose, pull it out of your bloodstream, bring your blood sugar down more quickly and more easily, help your body stay sensitive to insulin, help everything work the way it's supposed to. But Marguerite didn't know any of this, didn't know about blood sugar or insulin sensitivity, or any of the science, just knew that walking after dinner felt good, felt right, felt like a pleasant way to end the meal and begin the evening. It was tradition, it was habit, it was just what people did. And it kept her healthy without her knowing it was keeping her healthy, without her trying, without any effort or intention, just by doing what everyone around her was doing, following the pattern, living the life that everyone lived. Meanwhile, in America, after dinner people sat on the couch, turned on the television, stayed there for hours, didn't move except to get up for snacks or to go to the bathroom. Their blood sugar spiked and stayed high. Their bodies struggled to process all the glucose. Their muscles, idle and unused, didn't help, didn't pull glucose from the bloodstream, just stayed still. And over time, over years, this pattern of eating and immediately sitting created problems, created insulin resistance, created weight gain, created all the metabolic issues that would later be called metabolic syndrome. But in the 1950s, nobody had a name for it yet. Nobody was connecting post-meal sitting with health problems. It was just life, just the modern way, just what people did now that they had comfortable couches and interesting television shows. Marguerite walked slowly, her husband beside her, the evening air cool on her face, her legs moving steadily, not fast, not with any particular destination in mind, just walking, just being, her body quietly, invisibly, efficiently processing her dinner, her blood sugar rising and then falling gently back to normal, her muscles using glucose, her metabolism working smoothly, everything happening automatically, without thought, without effort, just the natural result of movement, of walking, of doing what humans had done for thousands of years after eating, moving. Not sitting, moving. Can you imagine making this a habit? Can you imagine walking for just 15 minutes after dinner every single night? It sounds simple, sounds easy, and it is. But somehow in the modern world it feels impossible, feels like too much effort, feels like there's no time. But there is time, there's always time. It's just a question of what you do with it. Marguerite didn't have more time than you do, she just used it differently. She walked instead of watching TV, that's all. Same amount of time, different choice, different result. And here's the truly beautiful part, the part that'll make your thoughts go all soft and drifty. Walking after dinner made her sleep better. The gentle movement helped her body wind down, helped her transition from the activity of the day to the rest of the evening. The fresh air cleared her mind. The conversation with her husband connected them. Everything worked together to create a feeling of contentment, of completion, of a day well lived. And when she went to bed a few hours later, she fell asleep easily, naturally, without effort, because her body was ready. was relaxed, was satisfied in every way. But in America, people sat after dinner, watched TV, got invested in shows, stayed up later than they planned, went to bed feeling wired, feeling restless. Their bodies confused because they'd been still for hours, but their minds had been stimulated by screens, their blood sugar still elevated, their muscles stiff from sitting. Everything out of balance, everything just slightly wrong. And they'd lie in bed, unable to fall asleep easily, wondering why sleep was so difficult, not connecting it to the fact that they'd been completely sedentary since 6 p.m. Marguerite returned home from her walk, felt calm, felt ready for the rest of the evening. She might read for a bit, might do some mending, might just sit and talk with her husband, but she felt settled, grounded. The walk had done that, had given her body what it needed, had helped everything function the way it was supposed to, and she'd do it again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that, not because she was disciplined or motivated or trying to be healthy, just because it was what she did, what everyone did, what made sense. And the pattern repeated, night after night, year after year, decade after decade. Small choices, simple habits, nothing dramatic, nothing revolutionary, just walking, after dinner, just moving, instead of sitting, just doing what felt natural and right, and good. And her body rewarded her, stayed healthy, stayed lean, stayed strong, not because she was trying, but because she was living in a way that aligned with what her body needed, what it expected, what it had evolved to thrive with. Walking, just walking, after eating, every night, such a small thing, such a simple thing, such a powerful thing. Now let's talk about something you might not expect, boredom. In 1950s France, people were bored sometimes, actually bored. Not every moment was filled with entertainment or distraction or stimulation. You finished dinner, you walked, you came home, and then what? Maybe you read, maybe you talked, maybe you just sat, looked out the window, thought about things, or thought about nothing, just existed, just sat with yourself, and your thoughts, and the quiet, and this was normal, this was expected, this was just part of life. The boring parts, the slow parts, the parts where nothing much happened, and that was fine. Marguerite sat in her chair by the window. It was 8:30 in the evening. Dinner was done. The dishes were washed. The children were doing homework. Her husband was reading the newspaper, and she just sat, hands in her lap, looking out at the street below, watching people walk by, thinking about nothing in particular, just being, just existing in the moment, without needing to fill it with anything, without needing to be entertained, or stimulated, or distracted. Just being bored, comfortably bored, peacefully bored. And here's where you can really feel yourself sinking into sleep, where the story becomes a kind of lullaby, because boredom is good for you. Boredom is necessary. Your brain needs downtime, needs periods where nothing much is happening, where you're not processing information, or making decisions, or being stimulated, needs time to wander, to consolidate memories, to process emotions, to just exist without demand. And when you deny your brain this downtime, when you fill every moment with content and distraction and stimulation, your brain gets tired, gets overwhelmed, gets stressed, never fully rests, never fully recovers, just stays in a state of constant low-level activation that wears you down over time. But I haven't told you what boredom has to do with eating, because here's the thing, when you're bored and you don't have constant access to entertainment, you sit with the boredom, you tolerate it, you let it be. You don't immediately reach for something to make it go away, you just exist in it, and after a while the boredom passes, or it doesn't. But either way you survive it. You learn that boredom isn't dangerous, isn't something that needs to be immediately fixed, is just a feeling, a temporary state, something that comes and goes. But when you have constant access to entertainment, constant access to food, boredom becomes something you avoid at all costs, becomes something intolerable, something that must be immediately fixed. So the moment you feel bored, you reach for your phone, or you turn on the TV, or you go to the kitchen and open the refrigerator, not because you're hungry, but because you're bored, and you've learned that food fixes boredom, temporarily. Food provides stimulation, provides something to do, provides a distraction, so you eat. Not because your body needs food, but because your brain needs stimulation, and you've trained it to seek stimulation through food. Marguerite sat with her boredom, let it be, didn't need to fix it, didn't need to do anything about it, just sat. And eventually the boredom faded into something else, into contentment, into peace, into a kind of restful awareness that didn't need anything, that was complete in itself. She didn't eat between meals because it didn't occur to her to eat between meals. Food was for meal times, boredom was for sitting with. They weren't connected, they didn't overlap, they were separate things. separate experiences, separate parts of life. Can you imagine sitting with boredom? Can you imagine feeling restless and not immediately reaching for your phone or food or some other distraction? Can you imagine just being still and letting the feeling pass? It sounds impossible, sounds uncomfortable, sounds like something you'd never choose to do. But here's the thing, it gets easier. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. Your brain adjusts, learns that boredom is okay, learns that you don't need constant stimulation, learns to be comfortable with stillness, with quiet, with nothing much happening. And once your brain learns this, everything gets easier. You eat less, you stress less, you sleep better, because your nervous system isn't constantly activated, isn't constantly seeking the next hit of stimulation, can just be, can just rest. But in America, boredom was becoming extinct, was being systematically eliminated. Television was providing constant entertainment, radio, magazines, and soon there would be more screens, more content, more distraction, more stimulation available at every moment, and the ability to sit with boredom, to tolerate it, to exist in it peacefully, was being lost, was being trained out of people, replaced with a constant need for stimulation, for entertainment, for something to fill every moment. And when that something wasn't available, people turned to food, opened the refrigerator, ate, not because they were hungry, but because they were bored, and eating was something to do, was stimulation, was distraction, was relief from the unbearable feeling of having nothing to do. Marguerite stood up eventually, stretched, decided to mend a shirt that had lost a button, got her sewing kit, sat back down, threaded a needle, sewed on the button, slowly, carefully. The task took maybe 10 minutes, and then she was done, and she sat again, content, satisfied with having accomplished this small thing, this tiny insignificant thing that nonetheless felt meaningful, felt like enough. She didn't need more, didn't need constant accomplishment, or constant entertainment, or constant anything, just this, just small tasks, and long stretches of quiet, and the peaceful rhythm of an ordinary evening. And in America, someone sat on the couch, flipped through channels, found nothing interesting, got up, went to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, stared inside, took out some leftover pie, ate it standing at the counter, didn't really taste it, wasn't really hungry, just bored, just filling time, just doing something, anything, to avoid the uncomfortable feeling of having nothing to do, of being bored, of being alone with their thoughts. And the pie was eaten. The boredom remained, unfixed, unresolved, just temporarily covered up, waiting to return, demanding to be fed again, and again, and again, a cycle, a pattern, a trap, disguised as comfort, disguised as satisfaction, disguised as normal life. But really just emptiness, trying to fill itself, failing, trying again, failing again, on and on, for... Let's talk about something that sounds almost philosophical. The concept of enough. In 1950s France, people understood enough. Not in a moral way, not as some kind of virtue they were trying to cultivate, just as a practical reality. You ate enough, you bought enough, you had enough, and then you stopped. Not because you couldn't have more, but because more wasn't necessary, wasn't needed, wasn't even particularly desirable. Enough was enough. The concept made sense, felt natural, felt right. Marguerite finished her dinner, put down her fork. She'd eaten enough. Her plate still had a little bit of food on it, a few green beans, a small piece of potato, but she was full, satisfied. So she stopped. She didn't force herself to finish everything, didn't feel obligated to clean her plate, didn't feel guilty about the small amount of food that would be thrown away or saved for tomorrow. She'd eaten enough. That was what mattered. The amount on the plate was irrelevant. The feeling of satiety was what counted. So she stopped. Simple as that. And here's where your mind can really soften and settle, where you can feel the wisdom of this simple concept washing over you like a warm blanket. Because knowing when enough is perhaps the most important skill when it comes to food, when it comes to weight, when it comes to health. You eat until you're satisfied, until you've had enough, and then you stop. You don't eat until you're stuffed. Don't eat until the plate is empty. Don't eat until the food is gone. Just until you're satisfied, until enough is enough. But this skill, this ability to recognize enough, requires something. It requires that you're paying attention, that you're present, that you're actually tasting the food and feeling your body's signals, and noticing when satisfaction arrives. And you can't do that if you're eating fast. Can't do it if you're distracted. Can't do it if you're eating while watching TV or scrolling your phone, or reading or working. Because your attention is elsewhere, your awareness is elsewhere, and the signal of enough comes and goes unnoticed. so you keep eating. Past enough, past satisfied, past full, into uncomfortable, into stuffed, into that feeling of having eaten too much that makes you regret the meal even as you're finishing it. Marguerite ate slowly, paid attention, tasted each bite, and somewhere around 3/4 through her meal, she felt it, the shift, the subtle change from hungry to satisfied, from wanting more to having enough. And she stopped, right there. Even though there was more food, even though it tasted good, even though she could have kept eating, she stopped, because enough was enough, and continuing past enough served no purpose. Didn't make the meal better, didn't make her feel better, just made her uncomfortable. So why do it? Can you feel how simple that is? Can you feel how radical that simplicity is in the modern world? Because we've been taught to clean our plates, taught that wasting food is wrong, taught that we should eat everything we're served, taught that enough is defined by what's on the plate, not by what's in our bodies. And that teaching, well-meaning as it might be, has broken our ability to recognize enough, has disconnected us from our own satiety signals, has made us rely on external cues, plate size and portion size, instead of internal cues, hunger and fullness. And the result is that we eat too much, consistently, chronically, without even realizing it. But in France, in Marguerite's world, the concept of enough was still intact, still understood, still respected. You ate until you were satisfied, and then you stopped. Period. No guilt, no obligation, no external rules overriding your internal signals. Just enough. Just satisfaction. Just the natural endpoint of a meal, eaten with attention and awareness. Right, and a coin. And this concept of enough extended beyond food. You worked enough, not too much, not until you were exhausted, just enough to earn what you needed. You slept enough, you walked enough, you socialized enough. Everything in moderation, everything in balance. Not because you were trying to be balanced, not because you'd read self-help books about work-life balance, just because that's how life was structured, how it naturally unfolded, how it had always been. Enough work, enough rest, enough activity, enough stillness, enough of everything, and too much of nothing. Marguerite's life was full of enough. Enough food, but not too much. Enough movement, but not exhausting. Enough rest, but not lazy. Enough social connection, but not overwhelming. Enough solitude, but not lonely. Everything calibrated, not by conscious effort, but by the natural structure of her life, by the rhythms and patterns and traditions that guided her days without her having to think about them. She lived within a framework that automatically provided enough, that prevented excess, that created balance without requiring her to work for it. Meanwhile, in America, the concept of enough was disappearing, being replaced by more food, bigger portions, more possessions, bigger houses, more work, longer hours, more entertainment, more options, more everything. Always more, never enough. Because if more is available, if more is possible, why settle for enough? Why not have more? Why not keep going? Why not push further? And this mindset, this rejection of enough in favor of more, created a culture of excess, of overwork and overeating and overconsumption, of chronic stress and chronic exhaustion and chronic dissatisfaction, because more is never enough. More always wants more. It's insatiable, unending, impossible to satisfy. But enough is satisfying. Enough is peaceful. Enough is complete. Marguerite finished her dinner, felt satisfied, felt complete, didn't want more, didn't need more, had enough. And that was good. That was everything. That was the secret that nobody knew was a secret, because it had always just been obvious, until it wasn't, until more took over, until enough was forgotten. And the forgetting happened slowly, gradually, almost imperceptibly, one larger portion at a time, one extra helping at a time, one more snack at a time, until people forgot what enough felt like, forgot what satisfied meant, forgot that meals had natural endpoints, that fullness was a signal to stop, not a feeling to push through to get to stuffed. And once enough was forgotten, everything else followed. Weight increased, health declined, satisfaction disappeared, all because a simple concept, obvious and natural and intuitive, was lost, buried under mountains of more food, more choices, more everything, more, but never, ever enough. Now let's talk about something small but significant, the distance between kitchen and table. In 1950s France, kitchens were small, truly small, just big enough for one person to work in comfortably, maybe two if they didn't mind bumping into each other. and the table where you ate was usually in a different room, the dining room if you had one, or the living area if your apartment was tiny, but separate. Not in the kitchen, not right next to where food was prepared. There was distance, physical distance, between food and eating, between preparation and consumption, and that distance mattered more than anyone realized. Marguerite cooked in her small kitchen, made dinner at the stove, plated the food carefully, carried the plates to the table in the next room, set them down, called her family. They came, they sat, they ate, and when the meal was done, the plates were carried back to the kitchen. The food that remained, if any, was put away, covered, stored in the refrigerator or the cupboard, out of sight. The kitchen was cleaned, the dishes washed, and then the kitchen was left, closed off, done for the day. You didn't linger in the kitchen, didn't hang around near food, didn't keep going back for more. The meal was over. The kitchen was closed. Simple as that. And here's where you can feel your thoughts starting to dissolve into sleep, where the information becomes less important than the feeling of boundaries, of separation, of things having their place and their time. The kitchen was for cooking, the table was for eating, the living area was for living, everything separate, everything distinct, everything with its own purpose and its own space. And this separation created a kind of discipline without requiring discipline, created boundaries without requiring willpower. You ate at the table. When you were done, you left the table. You didn't return to the kitchen unless it was time for the next meal, because the kitchen wasn't a hangout spot, wasn't a place to browse, wasn't somewhere you just wandered through looking for something to eat. It was a workspace, and when the work was done, you left. But in America, kitchens were getting bigger, much bigger. Open-plan kitchens that flowed into dining areas that flowed into living areas. Everything open, everything connected, no boundaries, no separation. And the kitchen wasn't just a workspace anymore. It was a social space, a gathering space, a place where people hung out, leaned against counters, talked, and constantly had access to food because the food was right there, visible, available, the refrigerator just a few steps away, the pantry right there, the snacks on the counter, everything within arm's reach, all the time. And this accessibility changed everything, changed how people ate, changed how often people ate, changed the relationship between hunger and eating. Because when food is always visible, always accessible, always within reach, you eat more. Not because you're hungrier, but because it's there, because you see it. Because passing by the kitchen 20 times a day means 20 opportunities to grab something. 20 moments where you might not be hungry but the food is there and you take it anyway. Just a handful of something, just a bite, just a taste, over and over throughout the day, until you've eaten hundreds of extra calories without even sitting down for a meal, without even being aware you've eaten anything significant. Marguerite's kitchen had a door, a real door that closed, and when dinner was over, she closed it. Not dramatically, not making a statement, just closed it because that's what you did. The kitchen was done for the day, finished, closed, and it stayed closed until breakfast tomorrow. If she got thirsty in the evening, she went to the kitchen, got water, and left. Didn't browse, didn't look around, didn't open the refrigerator to see what was there, just got what she needed, and left. Because food wasn't entertainment, wasn't a casual thing you engaged with throughout the day, was serious, was meals, was specific times, not constant grazing. Can you imagine having a closed kitchen? Can you imagine the food being in a separate room behind a closed door? Can you imagine the discipline that creates without requiring discipline? The boundary that creates without requiring willpower? Let that image settle into your mind. Let it make you feel calm and contained and safe. Because boundaries are good. Boundaries protect you. Boundaries prevent excess. Not by forcing restriction, but by creating natural limits. By making certain behaviors harder. By adding friction. By requiring you to actually decide to eat rather than just mindlessly consuming whatever is within reach. But open-plan kitchens removed that friction, removed that boundary, made food constantly visible and constantly accessible. And the results were predictable. People ate more, snacked more, grazed more. Not because they were hungrier, but because the food was there, right there, always there, calling to them, tempting them, making it easier to eat than not to eat. And over time, over years, this constant accessibility created a pattern, a habit, a lifestyle, where eating was no longer confined to meals, where eating was just something that happened all day long, constantly, endlessly, without much thought or awareness. Marguerite closed her kitchen door. The food was out of sight, out of mind. She sat in a chair, read her book, thought about nothing in particular, didn't think about food at all. Why would she? Dinner was over. The next meal was breakfast tomorrow. Food didn't exist in her consciousness until then, didn't call to her, didn't tempt her, didn't even register as a possibility, because the kitchen was closed, the food was put away, the meal was done, and that was that. And in America, someone walked past their open kitchen for the 10th time that evening, glanced at the counter where a bag of chips sat, grabbed a handful, ate them without thinking, without even really tasting them, walked away, came back 20 minutes later, another handful, another mindless consumption, another 100 calories that didn't register as eating because it wasn't a meal, wasn't sitting down with a plate, was just grazing, just browsing, just something to do while walking through the house. And those handfuls added up, those mindless bites accumulated, those casual snacks became pounds, became weight gain, became a problem that nobody could quite understand, because everyone was eating normal meals and not eating that much. But they were eating that much. They just weren't counting it, weren't seeing it, weren't aware of it, because it happened in the spaces between, in the moments of passing by, in the casual accessibility of food that was always there, always visible, always within reach, behind no door, behind no boundary, behind no protection from themselves. Let's talk about something that might sound trivial but isn't. The speed at which you eat. In 1950s France, eating fast was considered rude, not just slightly impolite, but actually rude, like chewing with your mouth open or talking loudly in a restaurant. You didn't eat fast, you ate slowly, deliberately, with attention and care, because eating wasn't just about getting food into your body, it was an experience, a social occasion, a moment of pleasure and connection, and rushing through it defeated the entire purpose, made it meaningless, turned it into mere refueling, which was, well, uncouth, uncivilized, very American. Marguerite took small bites, chewed thoroughly, put her fork down between bites, sipped her wine, engaged in conversation, paused, looked at the people around her, listened, responded, took another bite. The whole process was slow, languid, relaxed. A meal might take an hour, sometimes more, and that was normal, that was expected. That was how civilized people ate, how humans were meant to eat, with leisure, with attention, with presence. And here's where you can really feel yourself drifting, where the story wraps around you like a soft blanket, because eating slowly does something important, something your body desperately needs. It gives your digestive system time to work, time to signal your brain that food is arriving, time to produce the enzymes needed to break down what you're eating, time to register fullness, time to feel satisfied. All of these processes take time. They're not instantaneous. They're slow, biological, operating on a timeline that can't be rushed. And when you eat slowly, you work with your biology. You give your body what it needs, the time to do its job properly. But when you eat fast, you override everything. You shove food in faster than your stomach can signal your brain, faster than your digestive system can keep up, faster than satiety can register. And by the time your brain catches up, by the time the signal of fullness finally arrives, you've already eaten far more than you needed. You're uncomfortably full, stuffed, regretting the last several bites. But it's too late. The damage is done. The food is eaten. The excess calories consumed. Marguerite never felt stuffed after a meal, never felt uncomfortably full, never regretted eating, because she stopped before that point, stopped when satisfaction arrived. And she knew when satisfaction arrived because she ate slowly enough to notice it, to feel it, to recognize the subtle shift from hungry to satisfied, from wanting more to having enough. The shift was gentle, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention, but she was paying attention, so she caught it, and she stopped. Can you imagine eating so slowly that you actually taste every bite? Can you imagine putting your fork down between bites? Can you imagine making a meal last an hour? It probably sounds impossible, sounds like something you don't have time for, but here's the thing, and let this sink in gently. You're going to spend time eating anyway. Whether you eat in 15 minutes or 60 minutes, you're still spending time on the meal. The only difference is whether you rush through it mindlessly or experience it fully. Whether you finish feeling satisfied or feeling stuffed. Whether you eat the right amount or too much. The time is going to be spent either way. You just choose how. But in America, eating was getting faster. Much faster. Drive-thrus were appearing. Fast food was becoming normal. And even at home, even at the dinner table, people were eating faster, bigger bites, less chewing, continuous eating without pauses, finishing a meal in 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. If it was breakfast grabbed on the way out the door, everything rushed, everything hurried, everything consumed as quickly as possible so you could move on to the next thing, because time was money, time was precious. Time couldn't be wasted on something as mundane as eating. Better to eat fast and do something productive, something important, something other than just sitting and eating and being. Marguerite chewed each bite thoroughly, 20 times, 30 times, until the food was liquid, until it was ready to swallow, until her mouth had done its part of the digestive process. She didn't think about this consciously, didn't count chews, just chewed until it felt right, until the food was ready, and this thorough chewing did something important. It broke the food down more completely, made it easier for her stomach to process, made nutrients more available, made everything work more smoothly, and it slowed her down, made eating take longer, made each bite a conscious experience rather than an unconscious action. And there was another benefit, a benefit that would make your eyelids even heavier. When you chew thoroughly, you taste food more completely. You experience all the flavors, all the textures, all the nuances. Food tastes better, more interesting, more satisfying. So you need less of it, need less to feel satisfied, because satisfaction comes from the experience, not just the volume, from truly tasting and experiencing each bite, not from shoveling food in until your stomach physically can't hold anymore. But American food was being designed for fast eating, soft, pre-chewed almost, requiring minimal jaw work, bread that dissolved in your mouth, meat so tender it barely needed chewing, everything engineered for speed, for convenience, for getting it down fast. And people adapted, started eating faster, started chewing less, started consuming more food in less time, started gaining weight and wondering why, not connecting their eating speed to their expanding waistlines, not understanding that speed matters, that time matters, that giving your body time to register what you're eating matters enormously. Marguerite finished her meal, set down her fork gently, dabbed her mouth with her napkin, felt satisfied, felt content, felt that her meal had been an experience worth having, not just fuel consumed, but a moment lived, a pleasure experienced, a social occasion enjoyed, and her body, given the time it needed, had registered everything appropriately, had told her when to stop, had processed what she'd eaten efficiently, had done its job well because she'd given it the time to do so. And in America, someone finished their meal in 12 minutes, barely tasted it, felt full but not satisfied, got up from the table already thinking about what they'd eat next, already planning the snack they'd have in an hour or two, because the meal, rushed and mindless, hadn't satisfied anything except the physical need for calories, hadn't provided pleasure, hadn't provided experience, hadn't provided the deep satisfaction that comes from eating slowly and attentively and well, just provided fuel, quickly, efficiently, joylessly, and left them wanting more, always wanting more, never quite satisfied, never quite content, always chasing something, never quite catching it. Let's talk about something that might sound trivial but isn't. The speed at which you eat. In 1950s France, eating fast was considered rude, not just slightly impolite, but actually rude, like chewing with your mouth open or talking loudly in a restaurant. You didn't eat fast, you ate slowly, deliberately, with attention and care, because eating wasn't just about getting food into your body, it was an experience, a social occasion, a moment of pleasure and connection, and rushing through it defeated the entire purpose, made it meaningless, turned it into mere refueling, which was, well, uncouth, uncivilized, very American. Marguerite took small bites, chewed thoroughly, put her fork down between bites, sipped her wine, engaged in conversation, paused, looked at the people around her, listened, responded, took another bite. The whole process was slow, languid, relaxed. A meal might take an hour, sometimes more, and that was normal. That was expected. That was how civilized people ate, how humans were meant to eat, with leisure, with attention, with presence. And here's where you can really feel yourself drifting, where the story wraps around you like a soft blanket, because eating slowly does something important, something your body desperately needs. It gives your digestive system time to work, time to signal your brain that food is arriving, time to produce the enzymes needed to break down what you're eating, time to register fullness, time to feel satisfied. All of these processes take time. They're not instantaneous. They're slow, biological, operating on a timeline that can't be rushed. And when you eat slowly, you work with your biology. You give your body what it needs, the time to do its job properly. But when you eat fast, you override everything. You shove food in faster than your stomach can signal your brain, faster than your digestive system can keep up, faster than satiety can register. And by the time your brain catches up, by the time the signal of fullness finally arrives, you've already eaten far more than you needed, You're uncomfortably full, stuffed, regretting the last several bites. But it's too late. The damage is done. The food is eaten. The excess calories consumed. Marguerite never felt stuffed after a meal, never felt uncomfortably full, never regretted eating, because she stopped before that point, stopped when satisfaction arrived. And she knew when satisfaction arrived because she ate slowly enough to notice it, to feel it, to recognize the subtle shift from hungry to satisfied, from wanting more to having enough. The shift was gentle, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention, but she was paying attention, so she caught it, and she stopped. Can you imagine eating so slowly that you actually taste every bite? Can you imagine putting your fork down between bites? Can you imagine making a meal last an hour? It probably sounds impossible, sounds like something you don't have time for, but here's the thing, and let this sink in gently. You're going to spend time eating anyway. Whether you eat in 15 minutes or 60 minutes, you're still spending time on the meal. The only difference is whether you rush through it mindlessly or experience it fully. Whether you finish feeling satisfied or feeling stuffed. Whether you eat the right amount or too much. The time is going to be spent either way, you just choose how. But in America, eating was getting faster, much faster. Drive-thrus were appearing, fast food was becoming normal, and even at home, even at the dinner table, people were eating faster, bigger bites, less chewing, continuous eating without pauses, finishing a meal in 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. If it was breakfast grabbed on the way out the door, everything rushed, everything hurried, everything consumed as quickly as possible so you could move on to the next thing. Because time was money, time was precious. Time couldn't be wasted on something as mundane as eating. Better to eat fast and do something productive, something important, something other than just sitting and eating and being. Marguerite chewed each bite thoroughly, 20 times, 30 times, until the food was liquid, until it was ready to swallow, until her mouth had done its part of the digestive process. She didn't think about this consciously, didn't count chews, just chewed until it felt right, until the food was ready, and this thorough chewing did something important. It broke the food down more completely, made it easier for her stomach to process, made nutrients more available, made everything work more smoothly, and it slowed her down, made eating take longer, made each bite a conscious experience rather than an unconscious action. And there was another benefit, a benefit that would make your eyelids even heavier. When you chew thoroughly, you taste food more completely. You experience all the flavors, all the textures, all the nuances. Food tastes better, more interesting, more satisfying. So you need less of it, need less to feel satisfied. Because satisfaction comes from the experience, not just the volume. From truly tasting and experiencing each bite, not from shoveling food in until your stomach physically can't hold anymore. But American food was being designed for fast eating, soft, pre-chewed almost, requiring minimal jaw work, bread that dissolved in your mouth, meat so tender it barely needed chewing, everything engineered for speed, for convenience, for getting it down fast. And people adapted, started eating faster, started chewing less, started consuming more food in less time, started gaining weight and wondering why, not connecting their eating speed to their expanding waistlines, not understanding that speed matters, that time matters, that giving your body time to register what you're eating matters enormously. Marguerite finished her meal, set down her fork gently, dabbed her mouth with her napkin, felt satisfied, felt content, felt that her meal had been an experience worth having, not just fuel consumed, but a moment lived, a pleasure experienced, a social occasion enjoyed, and her body, given the time it needed, had registered everything appropriately, had told her when to stop, had processed what she'd eaten efficiently, had done its job well because she'd given it the time to do so. And in America, someone finished their meal in 12 minutes, barely tasted it, felt full but not satisfied, got up from the table already thinking about what they'd eat next, already planning the snack they'd have in an hour or two, because the meal, rushed and mindless, hadn't satisfied anything except the physical need for calories, hadn't provided pleasure, hadn't provided experience, hadn't provided the deep satisfaction that comes from eating slowly and attentively and well, just provided fuel, quickly, efficiently, joylessly, and left them wanting more, always wanting more, never quite satisfied, never quite content, always chasing something, never quite catching it. Let's talk about something that might sound trivial but isn't. The speed at which you eat. In 1950s France, eating fast was considered rude. Not just slightly impolite, but actually rude. Like chewing with your mouth open or talking loudly in a restaurant. You didn't eat fast, you ate slowly, deliberately, with attention and care, because eating wasn't just about getting food into your body. It was an experience, a social occasion, a moment of pleasure and connection, and rushing through it defeated the entire purpose, made it meaningless, turned it into mere refueling, which was, well, uncouth, uncivilized, very American. Marguerite took small bites, chewed thoroughly, put her fork down between bites, sipped her wine, engaged in conversation, paused, looked at the people around her, listened, responded, took another bite. The whole process was slow, languid, relaxed. A meal might take an hour, sometimes more, and that was normal, that was expected. That was how civilized people ate, how humans were meant to eat, with leisure, with attention, with presence. And here's where you can really feel yourself drifting, where the story wraps around you like a soft blanket, because eating slowly does something important, something your body desperately needs. It gives your digestive system time to work, time to signal your brain that food is arriving, time to produce the enzymes needed to break down what you're eating, time to register fullness, time to feel satisfied. All of these processes take time. They're not instantaneous, they're slow, biological, operating on a timeline that can't be rushed. And when you eat slowly, you work with your biology. You give your body what it needs, the time to do its job properly. But when you eat fast, you override everything. You shove food in faster than your stomach can signal your brain, faster than your digestive system can keep up, faster than satiety can register. And by the time your brain catches up, by the time the signal of fullness finally arrives, you've already eaten far more than you needed. You're uncomfortably full, stuffed, regretting the last several bites. But it's too late. The damage is done. The food is eaten. The excess calories consumed. Marguerite never felt stuffed after a meal, never felt uncomfortably full, never regretted eating, because she stopped before that point, stopped when satisfaction arrived, and she knew when satisfaction arrived because she ate slowly enough to notice it, to feel it, to recognize the subtle shift from hungry to satisfied, from wanting more to having enough. The shift was gentle, easy to miss if you weren't paying attention, but she was paying attention, so she caught it, and she stopped. Can you imagine eating so slowly that you actually taste every bite? Can you imagine putting your fork down between bites? Can you imagine making a meal last an hour? It probably sounds impossible, sounds like something you don't have time for. But here's the thing, and let this sink in gently. You're going to spend time eating anyway. Whether you eat in 15 minutes or 60 minutes, you're still spending time on the meal. The only difference is whether you rush through it mindlessly or experience it fully. Whether you finish feeling satisfied or feeling stuffed. Whether you eat the right amount or too much, the time is going to be spent either way. You just choose how. But in America, eating was getting faster, much faster. Drive-thrus were appearing. Fast food was becoming normal. And even at home, even at the dinner table, people were eating faster. Bigger bites, less chewing, continuous eating without pauses, finishing a meal in 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes if it was breakfast grabbed on the way out the door. Everything rushed. Everything hurried, everything consumed as quickly as possible so you could move on to the next thing. Because time was money, time was precious, time couldn't be wasted on something as mundane as eating. Better to eat fast and do something productive, something important, something other than just sitting and eating and being. Marguerite chewed each bite thoroughly, 20 times, 30 times, until the food was liquid, until it was ready to swallow, until her mouth had done its part of the digestive process. She didn't think about this consciously, didn't count chews, just chewed until it felt right, until the food was ready. And this thorough chewing did something important. It broke the food down more completely, made it easier for her stomach to process, made nutrients more available, made everything work more smoothly. And it slowed her down, made eating take longer, made each bite a conscious experience rather than an unconscious action. And there was another benefit, a benefit that would make your eyelids even heavier. When you chew thoroughly, you taste food more completely. You experience all the flavors, all the textures, all the nuances. Food tastes better, more interesting, more satisfying. So you need less of it, need less to feel satisfied, because satisfaction comes from the experience, not just the volume, from truly tasting and experiencing each bite, not from shoveling food in until your stomach physically can't hold anymore. But American food was being designed for fast eating, soft, pre-chewed almost, requiring minimal jaw work, bread that dissolved in your mouth, meat so tender it barely needed chewing, everything engineered for speed, for convenience, for getting it down fast. And people adapted, started eating faster, started chewing less, started consuming more food in less time, started gaining weight and wondering why, not connecting their eating speed to their expanding waistlines, not understanding that speed matters, that time matters, that giving your body time to register what you're eating matters enormously. Marguerite finished her meal, set down her fork gently, dabbed her mouth with her napkin, felt satisfied, felt content, felt that her meal had been an experience worth having, not just fuel consumed, but a moment lived, a pleasure experienced, a social occasion enjoyed, and her body, given the time it needed, had registered everything appropriately, had told her when to stop, had processed what she'd eaten efficiently, had done its job well because she'd given it the time to do so. And in America, someone finished their meal in 12 minutes, barely tasted it, felt full but not satisfied, got up from the table already thinking about what they'd eat next, already planning the snack they'd have in an hour or two, because the meal, rushed and mindless, hadn't satisfied anything except the physical need for calories, hadn't provided pleasure, hadn't provided experience, hadn't provided the deep satisfaction that comes from eating slowly and attentively and well, just provided fuel, quickly, efficiently, joylessly, and left them wanting more, always wanting more, never quite satisfied, never quite content, always chasing something, never quite catching it. Now let's talk about something that sounds almost poetic, the relationship with seasons. In 1950s France, food followed the seasons, not by choice, not because people were trying to be mindful or sustainable or traditional, but because that's all there was. In spring, you ate asparagus and new potatoes and fresh peas. In summer, tomatoes and berries and stone fruits. In fall, apples and squash and mushrooms. In winter, root vegetables and cabbage and preserved foods. The market changed with the seasons. What was abundant and cheap in July was unavailable in January. What you ate in March was different from what you ate in September. And this created a rhythm, a cycle, a sense of time passing marked by what was on your plate. Marguerite looked forward to things. In early June, the first cherries would appear at the market. She'd buy some, take them home, eat them slowly, savouring each one. They were special, precious, available for maybe 6 weeks, and then gone until next year. So you appreciated them, didn't take them for granted, didn't eat them mindlessly, ate them with attention and gratitude, and a slight sense of urgency because soon they'd be gone, and then they were gone, and you waited. Waited 11 months until they appeared again, and that waiting made them taste better, made them more special, made them something to anticipate, something to look forward to, something that marked the passing of time and the turning of seasons. And here's where your mind can really drift into that soft, dreamy space, where you can feel the wisdom of this seasonal rhythm, because when food follows seasons, you never get bored, you never get tired of eating the same things over and over, because you're not eating the same things over and over, you're eating what's available now, and in a few weeks, different things will be available, and a few weeks after that, different still. Everything, constantly changing, constantly cycling, constantly new and interesting and worth paying attention to. You don't tire of tomatoes because you only eat them for 3 months, and then they're gone, and you don't eat them again for 9 months, and by then you've forgotten how good they are. So that first tomato of summer tastes like revelation, tastes like coming home, tastes like something you've been waiting for all year. But I haven't told you what this does to how much you eat, because when food is seasonal, when it's only available for a limited time, you eat reasonable amounts. You don't overconsume. Don't eat cherries until you're sick of them, because they're too special, too limited, too precious. You eat some, enjoy them, and save room for the other foods that are also in season. You spread your attention across everything that's available. Don't fixate on one thing. Don't eat it to excess. Just enjoy it while it's here, and then let it go, and wait for it to come back. Marguerite bought tomatoes in July and August and September. For 3 months she ate tomatoes regularly, sliced with salt and a little oil, in salads, in sauces, fresh and simple and delicious. And then October came, and the tomatoes were gone. All the ones that remained were pale and mealy and sad, so she stopped buying them, stopped eating them, stopped thinking about them, and moved on to what was available now. Apples, squash, the foods of fall, different flavours, different textures, different meals, everything shifting, everything changing, everything part of the larger rhythm of the year. Can you imagine eating this way? Can you imagine waiting for foods? Can you imagine the anticipation and the appreciation and the sense of time marked by what you're eating? Let that image settle into your mind. Let it make you feel connected to something larger than yourself, something ancient and cyclical and enduring, the turning of seasons, the rhythm of the earth, the natural order of things, not fighting it, not trying to have everything all the time, just accepting it, working with it, finding pleasure in it. But in America, seasons were disappearing from food. Supermarkets were starting to carry everything year-round. Tomatoes in January, shipped from somewhere far away where it was summer. Strawberries in November, asparagus in December, everything available all the time. And this seemed like progress, seemed like abundance, seemed like winning, like we'd conquered nature, like we'd escaped the tyranny of seasons, like we could have whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted it. But something was lost, something important. The anticipation was gone, the appreciation was gone, the sense of special occasion was gone. When you can have tomatoes any time, they stop being special, stop being something you look forward to, stop tasting like anything more than just tomatoes, generic, unremarkable, available, always available. So you don't pay attention, don't appreciate them, don't feel grateful for them. They're just there, like everything else, constant, reliable, boring. And when food stops being special, when nothing is seasonal anymore, when everything is always available, you eat more of it. You eat mindlessly. You eat without appreciation. You eat without attention. Because why pay attention when it'll be there tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that? There's no urgency, no reason to savor, no reason to notice. It's just food, just stuff, just another thing to consume without thought. Marguerite ate her last tomato of the season, knew it was the last, paid attention to it, tasted it fully, felt grateful for the summer that had provided it, and then she was done with tomatoes until next year, and that was okay, that was good even, because now there would be other things, new things, different things. The cycle would continue, the seasons would turn, and she would turn with them, eating what made sense, what was available, what was meant to be eaten now, in this moment, in this season, not trying to have everything all the time, just having what was here, what was real, what belonged to this particular moment in the year. And it was enough, more than enough. It was everything. While in America someone bought strawberries in December, pale, flavorless, shipped from thousands of miles away, ate them without really tasting them, without appreciating them, without even noticing them, just consuming, just having, just taking for granted the miracle of having strawberries in winter, rooming, the miracle that wasn't a miracle anymore, just ordinary, just expected, just normal, and therefore invisible, and therefore meaningless, and therefore just more food, more consumption, more weight, more everything, and less of what actually mattered. Let's talk about something simple, the act of sitting down to eat. In 1950s France, you sat down to eat, always, every time, no exceptions. You didn't eat standing at the counter, didn't eat walking down the street, didn't eat in your car, didn't eat while doing something else. You sat down at a table, put the food on a plate, used proper utensils, and you ate. That was the whole activity. Just eating, just being present with your food, just giving the meal the attention and respect it deserved. It wasn't a rule you followed consciously. It was just how things were done, how everyone did things, how it had always been. Marguerite never ate standing up, never, not once. If she was hungry, she sat down, put food on a plate, even if it was just a piece of bread and cheese, even if it was just a snack. She sat, she used a plate, she used a knife. She ate properly, with attention, with presence. Because eating while standing, eating while walking, eating while doing something else, that wasn't eating, that was something else, something less, something that didn't count as a real meal, didn't provide real satisfaction, didn't deserve to be called eating. And here's where you can feel the truth of this settling into your bones, making you feel calm and grounded and right. Because when you sit down to eat, something happens, something important. You acknowledge the act of eating, you make it conscious, you make it intentional, you transform it from a mindless action into a deliberate choice, and that consciousness, that intentionality, that matters enormously. Because conscious eating is different from unconscious eating. When you're aware that you're eating, you eat less, you taste more, you enjoy more, you stop when you're satisfied, because you're paying attention to satisfaction. You're not just shoveling food in while your mind is elsewhere. But when you eat standing up, when you eat while walking or driving or working, your brain doesn't register it the same way, doesn't count it as eating, doesn't log it as a meal. So you can consume hundreds of calories while standing at the counter picking at leftovers, and your brain will tell you that you haven't eaten, that you're still hungry, that you need a real meal, because that standing up picking at food didn't count, wasn't real eating, was just something that happened, something that your brain didn't fully process or acknowledge or remember. Marguerite sat down for every meal, for every snack, for every bite of food that entered her mouth, and this simple act, this sitting down, created a boundary, created awareness, created a moment where she had to decide, am I hungry enough to sit down and eat? And if the answer was no, she didn't eat, didn't grab something while standing, didn't nibble while doing something else, just waited until she was hungry enough to sit down properly, to make it a real meal, to give it the time and attention it deserved. Can you imagine never eating while standing? Can you imagine always sitting down? Can you imagine the discipline that creates without requiring discipline? The consciousness that creates without requiring effort? Let that idea wash over you gently. Let it make you feel peaceful and intentional and grounded, because this is how humans are meant to eat. Sitting, paying attention, being present, not multitasking, not doing 5 things at once, just eating, just that one thing, given its full due. But in America, eating on the go was becoming normal, expected, even celebrated. You could grab breakfast and eat it in your car on the way to work. You could eat lunch at your desk while working. You could walk down the street eating a hot dog or an ice cream cone. You could stand at the counter and eat dinner straight from the pan. Nobody judged you. Nobody thought it was weird. It was just modern life, just efficiency, just making the most of your time, just multitasking, just being productive. But your body didn't know it was being productive. Your body just knew it was eating without sitting, eating without focus, eating without attention, and it responded accordingly. Didn't register the food properly, didn't feel satisfied properly, didn't signal fullness properly, just accepted the calories without providing the feeling of having eaten. So you ate more, ate again later, ate more often, because your brain kept waiting for a real meal, a sit-down meal, a meal that counted, and the standing up eating, the walking around eating, the eating while doing something else eating, that didn't count, that didn't register, that didn't satisfy. Marguerite finished her dinner, stood up from the table. The meal was over, the eating was done. She wouldn't eat again until breakfast tomorrow, because she'd sat down and eaten a proper meal and her body knew it, registered it, logged it, felt satisfied by it. There was no confusion, no ambiguity, no question about whether she'd eaten or not. She had. She'd sat down at a table with a plate and utensils and eaten. Therefore the meal was complete. Therefore she was done. Therefore no more food until the next designated eating time. The simplicity of it was beautiful. The clarity of it was profound. Sit down equals eating. Standing up equals not eating. Clear boundaries, clear rules, clear understanding between her body and her brain about what was happening. No mixed signals, no confusion, no mindless consumption that didn't count. And in America, someone stood at the kitchen counter after dinner, picking at leftovers, eating bite after bite after bite, not really tasting it, not really wanting it, just eating because it was there, because they were standing in the kitchen, because why not? And their brain, not registering this as real eating, would tell them an hour later that they were hungry, that they needed a snack, that they should eat something, even though they'd just consumed 300 calories standing at the counter. Their brain didn't know, didn't count it, didn't log it as eating. And the cycle continued, standing up eating that didn't satisfy, leading to more eating, leading to more standing up nibbling, leading to weight gain that seemed to come from nowhere, from nothing, from eating almost nothing, they'd say, but they were eating, just not in a way their brain recognized, not in a way their body could process properly, not in a way that created satisfaction, just eating, standing up, mindlessly, endlessly, invisibly, while Marguerite sat, always sat, and was satisfied, and was healthy, and was thin, without trying, without thinking, without knowing she was doing anything right, just sitting, just eating, just being. Just enough. And so our journey through 1950s France comes to a gentle close, like the last light fading from a summer evening, like a door closing softly behind you, like the final notes of a song you've heard before but can't quite remember where. And Marguerite is somewhere in that twilight now, walking home one last time, her basket empty, her day complete, her footsteps echoing on cobblestones worn smooth by 1,000 years of other footsteps, other lives, other people who also walked and ate and slept and never thought about whether they were doing it right, who just did it, just lived, just existed in the flow of days that moved like water, steady and sure and inevitable, carrying them from morning to night and back again, over and over, without drama, without crisis, without the constant questioning that seems to define our modern lives. And she climbs her stairs slowly now, feeling the pleasant tiredness in her legs that comes from a day of ordinary movement, ordinary activity, ordinary life lived at a human pace. Not too fast, not too slow, just right, just enough, always enough. And she opens her door and goes inside, and the day ends the way it always ends, with small rituals and quiet moments, and the soft settling of a life being lived well, without anyone noticing it's being lived well, without anyone marking it as special or significant or worthy of attention. Just a life, just one of billions of lives happening simultaneously across the world, each one thinking itself ordinary, each one actually extraordinary in its own small way, in its own quiet persistence, in its own gentle refusal to be anything other than what it is. And you can feel yourself floating now, can feel the story releasing its hold on you, can feel your thoughts becoming softer and slower and less distinct, less important, less urgent, just thoughts drifting through like clouds, barely there, barely real. And Marguerite is sleeping now too, in her small apartment, in her small bed, in her small corner of the world, breathing slowly, deeply, peacefully, dreaming of nothing in particular, or maybe not dreaming at all, just sleeping the way people used to sleep before the world got so loud and so bright and so demanding, sleeping the way you're about to sleep, deeply and fully and completely, without reservation, without worry, without the part of your mind that stays awake wondering if you're doing it right, because there is no right way to sleep. There's only sleeping, only letting go, only surrendering to the darkness and the quiet and the inevitable pull of rest. And everything we've talked about tonight, all the walking and the butter and the bread and the wine and the rituals and the rhythms, all of it fades now into something simpler, something wordless, something that doesn't need to be understood or remembered or analysed, just something that is, that was, that existed once in a time and place that no longer exists but that lives on somehow in the telling, in the remembering, in this moment right now as you drift towards sleep. And Marguerite is gone now, not really gone but receding, becoming less solid, less real, more like a feeling than a person, more like an idea than a life. And that's okay, that's how stories work. They give you something and then they fade, they show you something and then they let you go, and you're being let go now, released, freed, allowed to stop listening, stop thinking, stop being awake, allowed to just be, just rest, just sleep, deeply and peacefully and completely, the way people were always meant to sleep, without effort, without struggle, without anything except the simple act of closing your eyes and breathing slowly, and letting the day end, and trusting that tomorrow will come, and bring with it whatever it brings, and none of it matters right now. Nothing matters except this moment, this breath, this soft descent into sleep, into rest, into the quiet darkness that holds you, and keeps you, and asks nothing of you except that you surrender, that you let go, that you sleep, just sleep, deeply, peacefully, completely, now.